Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Epic video today. They're trying to bring back Thomas Crooks and Pete Ketchupgate because they're desperate. And shills Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly are leading the charge and, desperately trying to protect Trump. And then I got some stuff about Candace Owens, and, she just is the truth or equivalent of the show Lost, going down this endless rabbit hole of airplanes, and I'll get into that whole thing. And let me start off by saying this. This is like the voiceover portion. And so the powers that be could come out and tell you everything, tell you the truth about everything. Because there's all these various narratives, all this different disinformation. I mean, if they were capable of understanding what the truth is, right? Because people rationalize their behavior. They justify their behavior. They don't call what they're doing criminal activity. I'll show that clip at the end of this voiceover where it's a Ben Affleck movie where him and some of his former military special forces buddies are going in and they're going to kill a drug dealer and take his money. And he said, let's not sugarcoat. Let's not, just delude ourselves into believing we're doing something heroic here. We're going to commit one murder and one robbery. If we're successful, we're going to murder, a person without any sort of due process, and then we're going to take all his money, right? So you can justify it like we're stealing, we're Robin Hood, right, or whatever. And it's a kind of a neat scene because people just don't do that. Like people, when they're doing something wrong, and that's all of us, when we're doing something we know we shouldn't be doing, we can always make excuses of why we're doing it, right? We could always say, we're doing this to bad people. And that's what, you can make anybody, you can make the Palestinians bad. Like that one guy said, that people in Israel grow up with the idea that Palestinian people are the vermin of the world. They're disgusting, despicable. They're like cockroaches that need to be wiped out. Like if you grow up with that kind of mentality, then that's how you're going to treat these people, because you think it's justified. They need to be exterminated, right? And so, this is how the truth gets distorted by the people who are running the system, and distorted for anybody, based in perception and prejudice and people's own ability to create their own reality, right? Because that's what happens. People create their own reality. I saw this with my ex. When I realized when she would tell a story, or we would be talking about something that happened in the past, her version of the story seemed completely distorted to me. Like, I'm like, that's what you remember happening? Like, I have a really good memory. And, whatever way that she would start framing things. And it got worse over years. Like, so, we had a complete different personal perception of physical reality events that we had experienced together. I mean, you'll see that you have this with any of your people, your spouses and your siblings and people. You'll remember events differently. And one person might think, oh, dad was a good guy, or mom was a good guy, or, whatever, mom was right, dad was right, or, like whatever it might be. Like you have these things when your different perception and your placement in the family. We know this with the truth community. And there's some people who just believe Trump is the greatest guy ever, and everything he says, everything he brags about is true, right? I mean, there's just people like that. And so, like what movie are you watching? It's like you watched a movie and you go out and people ask you about the movie and you describe it completely different than the people that you were sitting next to, right? It's a different experience, right? And you see this with like football games and basketball games, and where the ref will blow a call and everybody will be groaning and talking about the refs, but when the refs blow the call in favor of their team, they don't say shit, right? Yeah, the refs are doing a great job. Like, it's just because you have a desired outcome and you are willing to see cheating or whatever it takes to get that desired outcome, which is your team winning. And so the people who, and I've said this before, but let's say they could tell the truth. Let's say they were honest and they could They know what the truth is, and they could tell it to you. They just tell it to all of us, and just say, this is what we're going to do to you. This is what we've been doing to you. This is why we're doing it. This is the whole thing, the whole plan, everything. They just unloaded the truth, right? And there's probably like an 80% chance almost nothing would change, and a 20% chance that the system would be destroyed. That's my guesstimate. But what wouldn't happen is like a rebirth of a better system where all the people would go to jail and everything would be held accountable, and all the things would that justice would be served. That wouldn't happen. Like there'd be a utopia. Like none of those things are on the table. Utopia isn't on the table. And even if you took away all the evil people, like you got all the real evil people, I talk about 10% of the population just being, evil. Some of those people working for God, creating God's outcome, fulfilling some spiritual goal, either coming down as higher developed souls and acting as a villain, playing a villainous role, or just, doing God's work without really, knowledge of it. Like everyone's doing God's work without even knowing about it, right? And so the system can't, like I said, the system, and everybody can see it. The system's too corrupt and people are too fucked up that even if the bad people are released, the really bad people, everyone's gone in a direction where, and the system is, it needs the bad people to run it. It feeds off of evil, it feeds off of deception, it feeds off of all these things. And so getting the truth out, like in the whole truth community thing, isn't going to bring about a significant change. And people themselves, how much are people willing to change themselves to adapt to a new system with God, based in God's laws and principles? Like you would have to give up so many things, evil things, or things that are generated from an evil, ungodly process. If you had, if I could list all the things, if someone could list all the things that you would have to give up to live in a society that wasn't corrupt, that wasn't the way the society was, that wasn't going against God's will, what kind of person you'd have to be. You'd be like, fuck that. Everyone would be like, fuck that. And everyone kind of knows this on some level. People get upset about one specific thing in the truth community and want to see justice served for one group of people and one, specific thing external to themselves without having to give up anything personally or changing. So the whole thing is a joke. The truth community is a joke. And the people in it are children, that are looking for some fantasy outcome where they don't have to change, and their worldview doesn't have to change, and their lifestyle doesn't have to change, and their relationship to God doesn't have to change, and they don't have to change anything, and that this so-called deep state is taken care of, like these fucking morons, right? So I'm going to demonstrate this with Candace Owens after I do the Thomas Crooks thing. I'm going to start off with Jerry Sandusky's story just to demonstrate something. So, like, this should be something everybody knows. Truth, in the sense of the truth community, can only do one thing, and that is undermine your faith in the system. And in some cases, people would rise up and burn down the system. Like that would be and there would have to be other things going on with that, like a lack of food, these things, a lack of whatever it is, some sort of lifestyle changes and anger and, irrational anger, mob-like anger. So that's the only possible outcome. That's the only thing that would change anything with the truth, the knowledge of the stuff that we know. Because we know enough already. Lots of us know enough already, whatever it is, about the specific nature of the system. And I have had a couple of advantages because when I grew up, I didn't get it. Like, I didn't get the American, whatever it was. Like, I watched football, and I still watch sports a little bit. I watched sports and played sports like the other kids. But as I went through the American society, I didn't get the American dream. Like, it wasn't something that was, I wanted to, at first, to be a naturalist and study animals. And then, I was like, I don't even know what the purpose of this American life is. Like, I saw my parents and other people, and and I didn't feel anything when there was the 4th of July celebration, or I started to, as I got older, I'm like, what's the point of Christmas? Like, what's the point of the prom? Like, what's these things, right? I didn't get it. And then I was as I got older into my, college years, and my friends started to marry up. They started to I was playing basketball in a basketball league, and I mean, just drinking alcohol and doing drugs because I had no purpose. I was just kind of lost or whatever. And people started to, live their adult lives, and I'm like, I don't understand. There's something missing in it. Like I don't see it. Like my whole life, it just didn't make sense to me. Like I didn't believe in it, and I knew it was bullshit to whatever extent it was, but I couldn't articulate it. I didn't understand it. It just wasn't for me, and so there was that. But I was in this what was called the Rahu period, and that's part of that. But part of it is because I knew it was bullshit. Like I didn't know I knew it was bullshit. Like I now tracing it backwards, I understand that I was prepared because I didn't buy in, right? I didn't buy into the whatever this whole thing is, the American dream. And then I had this spiritual awakening, thank God. I was able to have this really miraculous, I don't say miraculous, but intense experience where I was shown something where it doesn't happen very often for people who do the meditation, but it had to happen for me because I, wasn't really into it. Like I wasn't really seeking to, at least consciously aware that I wanted to pursue a relationship with God. When I was a little kid and, I was younger, I thought about God all the time. Like I just, I wondered about God and these things, into my teenage years. And I started to, I had a concussion from falling off a zip line and then, started smoking pot. And then, I was kind of lost there that was the Rahu period. But, I had this incredible experience of the Sajmarg meditation. And I, had this awakening, like a spiritual awakening. And then I had a purpose and a goal. And, the teachings were that you can't run away from material life, no matter how mundane or shitty or, corrupt and whatever's going on. You just have to, go in there and be a part of it and just be detached. Don't really, it's not that important, but you have to have a material existence. You're in a physical body. You have to have a job. You have to have a family. And that made it, much more bearable. Like all the things I couldn't do. Like I couldn't sustain any kind of a romantic relationship, even really friendships. But, those friendships were easier than, some long-term like girlfriends and things like that. I couldn't hold a job. I couldn't make it through college. Like I just couldn't function. And then, doing the meditation and having some sort of spiritual discipline, it made it easier. And so, being detached from this whole thing and not really buying into the system. And then there was teachings in the Sajmarg system about how this system was completely corrupt. It was completely demonic. And that it had to be destroyed, that there was going to be a spiritual world born on the bones and ashes of the material one. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like you can't fix this system. And I was, I knew that already. And that, the only way to start over was to burn it down in some way. Not, people doing it, but God, it would collapse of its own depravity. And then from that, and there had to be some kind of, slap in the face to humanity to realize that what we were doing was wrong and that we were going in the wrong direction. And, there had to be some redemptive attitude, like some kind of, oh, fuck, sorry, God, right? Okay, God, we got it wrong. Please help us, right the ship. There had to be that moment where people were weeping and really fucking feeling bad about, or even, feeling bad at what their parents and grandparents did. Like just, we can't, just suffering the consequences of living in a post-apocalyptic kind of situation. So I got it. Like I was like, all right, that makes sense. Like, it doesn't sound pleasant, but, like it kind of has to go that way. So then these Whispers of the Brighter World messages came out. In 2005, I was already awakening to the other stuff, the truther stuff. And, and I had some truther things. My brother, was an AM, he came back from Vietnam and he had guarded the poppy fields for the CIA in Vietnam. And he had this, he was one of these old school conspiracy theorist truthers. And he had a radio show about this stuff. So I got some of that from him and some of that just on my own and whatever. And so, it hasn't been so hard for me like it is for other people. Like I knew my religion sucked. I knew all these things. I knew there wasn't anything in the society that I was like, oh, this is wonderful. Like I didn't have some great experience, and I didn't have some deep attachment with my family that I was. This is a guy who, one of the preceptors who was there where I started doing the meditation. There's a woman. She wasn't really all that into it herself, but she had a guy come to her, and he felt the transmission, and he loved it. He loved the. He was a spiritual seeker, and then he came to her one day. He was really kind of bummed. He says, I can't do this anymore. And she's like, why not? He goes, I know this is a real thing, but my family's all deeply religious. His wife, his parents, and they're not going to come do this with me. They just can't. And I got to stick with them. Like I just, and so he gave up his spiritual life to, because of his family. And there's people like that are all close to their family, and you can't make your own decision because your family is this group, and you can't break away from the group. And they love each other, and they're supportive, and they're a good family. But it's, they're keeping, in his case, they were holding him back, and he was going to have to give up something that was in terms of his soul, like it's a once in a, this period of time in terms of the Hail Mary that's being given to humanity, it's a once in a fucking, millions of years, this kind of leaps that you can take in your spiritual life, just because humanity has to be pulled up because of the obvious reasons. But anyway, so I was given all those things, and then I started to dive into the truth community, and I had a level of detachment and knowledge of the system couldn't be fixed, and it had to come down. The system that now exists has to be destroyed so that another better system can take its place. And I knew that. Like I knew that on every cell, like a cellular level. Like it's, I've lived through these things in past lives, and I just, I have a sense of it. So I'm not all that, and I know what it means. Like having homesteaded, I know how bad it's going to suck for people, especially as you get older. Like it's that kind of lifestyle change. Even just changing your whole orientation to life. When you've been indoctrinated and programmed in so many different ways. For most people, they just, it's going to, the people who can survive will suffer, and the ones that can will just curl up in the fetal position and pray for the angels to take them away, because they just, be too much for them. They'll just check out. And a lot of people are checking out right now. They're mailing it in. They're giving up. They know it's, there's just so many NPCs running around out there. So, I feel like truly blessed in that sense, because there's lots of truthers that are stressed out every day. They think that they have to get to the bottom of this or bottom of that. People making content, people watching content, think there's a point to all this, and they're kind of desperate, and, there's no point. There's no point. There's no fairy tale ending here. There's no, and it can't exist. Like you can't change a demonic system and make it whole and make it, line with God's will. You can't do that. So, it's only one way the demonic system can end. And so it's allowed me to just sort of the end of my life, I enjoy things a lot more. This stuff, the American dream stuff that I had when I was a kid, I'm like, this is not for me. And I'm like, well, these things I appreciate now because I know they're not going to last. And whatever is good or pleasurable or whatever is, whatever's, I don't want to say pleasurable, but is, enjoyable and, things that are comforts and whatever. I'm like, you might as well enjoy them, right? This is, Babaji used to say, the second master of the system, and he was this guy who, he had very little money, and he didn't take donations in the beginning of the, system. And when he did take donations, he was very, clear that they had to come from people who could afford it and this whole thing. And so people would come to his house and stay there for days, from Europe and different parts of India and America and places like that, people, spiritual seekers. And he'd feed them on a meager budget, and they'd have this watery down dal. If you ever had Indian food, like dal is something you wouldn't find at a restaurant. It's just a form of lentil, with some spices in it, and they get a chapati, like a tortilla. And they're mostly starving. They're mostly hungry most of the time, especially like there's like big Danish people, like 6-foot women, like from Denmark, and like coming over, And Babji would feed him, and he'd say, eat up and enjoy. You can't be expected to be fed like this forever. Like that meager meal that he was serving them. Like there was going to be a time where people would be fighting rats for food, right? There's a great show called Future Man. My wife and I really enjoyed it, and there's people come back from the future, and they're like, they see people kissing or something, they go, "Oh, rat hole to rat hole," because they're eating rats, and they can't believe how disgusting it is to put your rat hole on somebody else's rat hole, because that's what they call their bowels. I'd been calling people's mouths ghoul hole, and then rat hole, so it was like equally, it was more funny for me. But like there's going to be difficult times ahead, and that's just the consequences. So, not to overindulge and not to, but just to like appreciate what we have while we have it. Like there's good outcomes, and appreciate the good part of the system, right? Be grateful and have an idea it's coming from God and whatever it might be. But either way, I have a lightness to me when I make these videos, because there's, the only positive outcome that can come from any of this in terms of any real change is that people discover divinity within them, and they start exercising that, that part of them everyone has a person in like a spiritual saint inside them. Everyone has a potential spiritual master inside of them. Everybody has a soul, and that soul wants to be actualized. That soul wants to be, wants to blossom, right? And so, there's like a farmer in every person. There's a hunter and a farmer. You have it genetically inside you. Like you have these things that are ancestral, and you have past lives where you've played these roles. So then when you start gardening, people are like, "Oh my God, I can't believe how much I love this." It's like, it fills you with a sense of well-being. When I first started milking cows, I was like, "Oh, this just feels so good." The cows have great energy. Whatever it is, they're just stable. And, people like take cows for granted because they're not cool animals or whatever it is. They're just wandering around a pasture. I mean, they're not like as beautiful as horses, and they're not, whatever. You have these pasture ornaments, these horses that people have. They never ride them, and they just, they're very finicky about what they eat. They don't serve a purpose. But these cows are wonderful animals. Like there's did the cow domesticate man, or did man domesticate the cow? Because the cow serves such a purpose in various ways. And, I was milking cows and doing these homesteading things, I really loved it. Like there's some part of me that just was like, wow, this is, like file found. And so we all have that kind of stuff in us. But more than that, we all have a spiritual seeker inside of us. And so that's like the only thing that I stress here, because, that's where real change comes from. And it'll prepare people for whatever comes next. Whatever's going to happen. Connecting to God is always the right answer. There's no question in which connecting to God is the wrong answer. Like whatever you're doing, whether you're going to be successful, well, you're going to need God, right? Even more so when you're going to be a failure, but you still need God then, right? Whatever your life has in store for you, connecting to God will, divinize your process. And so, that's why I talk about this. But in terms of the rest of this stuff, it's not going to change shit. And so, and I say this regularly, and I, really saw it last night when I started listening to Candace Owens' thing. And I'm like, she's just going down this never-ending, lost-like rabbit hole talking about fucking yellow planes and blue planes. And I'm going to cover that in a bit. But let's start off here.
Make no mistake about it. What we're about to do is criminal. We do not have the flag on our shoulders, and no amount of bullshit that we tell ourselves is going to change that. If we do our job right, we will be committing one murder and one armed robbery.
We're going to cover 3 different people. We're going to cover Jerry Sandusky, we're going to cover Graham Spanner, and we're going to cover Michael McCreary. So, Jerry Sandusky was the famous former defensive coordinator for the Penn State Nittany Lions football team. And he was caught sodomizing, here he is with Joe Paterno, which we're not going to get to Joe Paterno, but he's part of it, he was caught sodomizing a young boy of 10 years old in open glass door showers. So there was an area where in the Penn State football program, locker room, this is a multi-million-dollar, probably billion-dollar football program, right? Very important in Pennsylvania, lots of money, state school. And he was in the locker room where they had glass doors where you could see it straight into the showers. And it was like 10:30 at night. And this guy, Mike McCreary, who I guess he won $7.3 million defamation suit. But we'll find out what happened to him because I don't know. He was a young football coach who was the wide receivers coach at the football program. And he came into the locker room at like 10:30 at night. And he could hear a slapping sound, like something slapping, skin slapping against skin. He didn't know what it was. That's what it was, but he didn't know maybe. And so he walked back to the showers, and he saw Jerry Sandusky raping a 10-year-old boy. And he freaked the fuck out because, of course you would. And he went in and tells Joe Paterno, and they get the president involved. It was this guy, Graham Spanner, and he was born in Cape Town, South Africa, which I didn't know. Speaking of lions, the Nittany lions, and they tell the president that the whatever it is, and so Mike McCreary, this guy Graham Spanner, we'll get into him quite a bit, right? The guy Mike McCreary, I believe they ended up ostracizing and firing, right? Like it was a whole process. And he was, scapegoated and all the shit that happens to people who try to tell the truth and are whatever they are, right? He no longer works for the team. I don't know what he's doing now. I mean, he won some money, but he was definitely not treated like a hero. And this guy, Graham Spanner, we're going to get to him first. What he was all about. He was in charge of this thing. And, the first thing to know is this wasn't just one guy. This was a sex slave, child, thing, ring, abusive, pedo, kind of Jeffrey Epstein thing. This was a Jeffrey Epstein thing before Jeffrey Epstein. Because this guy was doing it right out in the open, Jerry Sandusky, and it took a rookie coach, some guy, semi-innocent young guy who's coaching the team and being psyched and wants to do whatever he's doing, in terms of his football career as a coach, who didn't get the memo that this thing was going on. And I'm sure Joe Paterno was involved in this. All these people were involved. And this guy, Jerry Sandusky, was, here they are together, Jerry Sandusky and Greg Spanner. Jerry Sandusky he was running these kids, like underprivileged kids. He had access to all these kids, and he abused so many of them. All this information came out. It was like, one of these, not only Jeffrey Epstein, but that guy in England, Jimmy Savile, it's been going on forever, and it's an institutionalized sexual abuse. And this was also made public when all these gymnasts, these female gymnasts came forward. And there was a doctor who was sexually abusing them, a coach, he was coach for the National Olympic team, and he was sexually abusing these girls, examining them. And that was a whole big scandal. You remember that? And again, there was a cover-up and, they just let it go on forever when the stuff was being reported. Like, people could come forward and was being reported, and it was just, it was something that they were not, the authorities didn't act in a way that was best for the victims. And this comes up time and time again. And I can say, working in treatment centers, that this is a plague. That this is, sexual abuse is a plague. Look at this creepy motherfucker. But he was not the only one. He was the only one who went to jail. He's the only one that received any severe consequences Jerry Sandusky, Penn State, and the culture of silence. Now, you could say they wanted to be silenced because it was embarrassing and they didn't want to ruin the reputation of the program. But, it's not that. This was a sexual abuse cult ring, and these guys were all involved in it. And so, let me switch over to a voiceover here. So, let's start with this guy, Gregory Spanner. So, I asked Gemini to go through this. I said, Gregory Spanner, NSA relationship and his role with Jerry Sandusky. The information you were asking touches upon three distinct high-profile topics related to the tenure of former Penn State President Graham Spanner, his relationship with the NSA, National Intelligence Agency, his eventual legal situation related to Jerry Sandusky, child abuse scandal, his role in the Sandusky scandal. Gregory Spanner's relationship with the NSA. Gregory Spanner had a significant, long-standing relationship with the National Security Agency that predates his time as president of Penn State. Background: Spanner holds a PhD in sociology and was recognized as an expert in demographic social change and large-scale data analysis. NSA advisory roles: he held several high-level advisory positions with the NSA over many years. He served as the NSA Scientific Advisory Board and later became the chair of NSA SAB for several years. The board is composed of top academics and industrial experts who provide independent scientific, technical advice to the director of the NSA. Penn State NSA under Spanner presidency, Penn State expanded its research footprint and Penn State expanded its research footprint, including work in areas of important national security. The university also has highly regarded cybersecurity and information sciences, leading to a close relationship with the university and the NSA in terms of research and workforce and development. The NSA, they went through and there was this porn addiction thing that was going on within the Pentagon and all these things. Remember, there's a whole scandal here. Of course, there was the scandal called the Franklin scandal that involved these boys, young boys from Nebraska, Boys Town, and they were being pimped out to these politicians and people. A lot of them Republicans. The Republicans seem to be really into this kind of stuff. The NSA also, usually swings towards Republicans. But there's a long-standing sexual abuse relationship here with these agencies, right? And this guy, he was still working for the NSA while he worked for Penn State, because you never stop working. These people who work for the CIA, that's a lifelong thing. And you might get other jobs, but you're still connected to these agencies. Spanner's role in Jerry Sandusky scandal involves the handling of internal reports of abuse dating back to 2001. In 2001, the core issue involved an incident where graduate assistant Mike McCurry reported witnessing Sandusky engage in an inappropriate act with a boy in the university shower. Spanner, along with he heard slapping of flesh, right? Like, think how fucked up that is. Handling Spanner, along with the athletic director Tim Curley and Vice President Gary Schultz, was informed of the incident. Instead of contacting law enforcement, the police, or Child Protective Services, they decided to handle the matter internally. The decision was to send a letter to Sandusky warning him about his behavior and barring him from bringing children into the campus facilities. So this guy was bringing children into the campus facilities like 10:30 at night, and nobody knew about it, right? And so the findings subsequent investigation included the Spanner and other administrators prioritized the reputation of the football program at the university over the welfare of children. They were accused of seeking to manage the issue quietly to avoid the scandal. Spanner faced criminal charges related to the cover-up of 2001 report. Initial charges were covering up the abuse and lying to investigator. After years of legal battles, including successful appeal, in the second trial, Spanner was ultimately convicted in 2021 of a misdemeanor count of endangered welfare. The conviction was based on a failure to report the 2001 incident and proper law enforcement authorities. He was sentenced to 2 months in jail and 2 months of house arrest. He appealed the conviction, which led to the delay in serving the sentence. His conviction was ultimately upheld by the Supreme Court in 2024, and he began serving his sentence thereafter. In summary, Greg Spanner's career included a distinguished advisory role at the NSA, but his legacy at Penn State is permanently marred by his role in internal handling of the initial reports concerning Sandusky. And so, this was 4 months this guy served. And, and who knows if that's like, this is like it's a nothing. And the guy still maintained some kind of advisory role at the NSA during this period of time. He had a link to them. He was still a part of that. He's still part of that club. Because they do shit like that at the NSA and this other stuff, right? So nothing really happened. Jerry Sandusky went to jail. So that just leaves us with Mike McCreary. Where is Mike McCreary now is the question that I asked. Based on public availability information, Mike McCreary maintains a very private life after the extensive legal and public scrutiny related to Jerry Sandusky's scandal. Here's what is generally known. He is believed to reside in Pennsylvania. Like, Gemini doesn't even know where he fucking lives, right? Employment. He has been reported to have worked various roles outside of a coaching or collegiate athletics since the scandal broke. Focusing on his privacy, he has not returned to a public role in football or academia. So this guy had a dream of being a football coach. He was a graduate assistant, like he was just, I don't know if he's an intern, right? And he wanted to get into football coaching. And he witnessed act of sexual abuse, and now his career's wrecked. Now, he got some kind of a settlement, it said there, and we don't know if he was actually paid or not. And we don't know if this scandal was meant to come out. Like, you never know about these things. Was this scandal like just a legitimate scandal, or was something that's supposed to just play out in the public? I think it was legitimate. But who knows? Like, we don't know any of these things, right? But this guy, this is what happens to whistleblowers. If you go through the lives of whistleblowers, their lives are ruined. And the people that run the system, that are behind this thing, make sure that whistleblowers pay. Maybe not Jerry Sandusky or this other clown, whatever his name was. I forgot it. The guy that's the NSA guy. But the institutions will make him pay. And so, do you think this guy would be rewarded as being a hero? He did the right thing, right? He saw something wrong. He reported it to the authorities that were available to him. And they fucking demonized the guy. And, to the extent that he won some kind of civil, he won a $7 million lawsuit against them. And, that's great, but here it is. Legal status. McCreary has key witness in the prosecution of the criminal trials of Jerry Sandusky and three administrators, Spanner, Curley, and Schultz. He also won a whistleblowing lawsuit against Penn State University in 2016 for defamation and wrongful firing. They fired him, although the monetary damages were later significantly reduced upon appeal. And so he probably didn't receive shit from them. They fired him. They have nothing on this guy. That's all they have. His last major public appearance was related to testimony in the criminal trials in a civil suit against the university. Since the conclusion of those legal proceedings, he has successfully retreated from the public eye. And so he was fired by the university. Why would they fire that guy? Like, why wouldn't they make that guy a hero after this thing all played out? If they want to reboot this university, why wouldn't they keep a guy like that on who did the right thing, right? But they fired him, and then he had to sue them. And so he was originally awarded $7 million plus a $5 million for, the judges said, like, for, being a whistleblower or whatever it was, like just that. And then he cost him $1.7 million in legal fees, and he was awarded that. And so that all came to $12 million or something like this, $12.3 million. And then that was significantly reduced, and Gemini doesn't know how much. And so he had to take less than, even though the university fucked him. His career's over, and he's in hiding somewhere, right? He might even be dead. Who knows where he was alive, right? And so this is what I'm talking about. There's no... the truth, this guy was a truther. He told truth. And people don't remember his name. They kind of remember Jerry Sandusky. Penn State has kind of been rebooted, and, that's whatever that was. The NSA isn't, been affected by this. The scandal didn't touch them at all. Even though the guy who ran this whole thing, the president of the university at the time, was an NSA guy. And so this is what I'm talking about. Like, it just doesn't happen. It doesn't do anything, right? You have all these young ladies who These gymnasts are abused by that doctor. The doctor went to jail. The university suffered some embarrassment. I mean, this is colleges where, you think that these kids should be protected. I mean, and young kids being brought in there, but they're not. And these are just, little places that get busted. How many of these things are going on that people don't know about? Like sexual abuse is a plague. And it goes far beyond Jeffrey Epstein. And the people with money and power and privilege. And then there's the psychological MK Ultra things where they sexually abuse kids and then they break them psychologically and then warp them into something. I mean, all these things have been reported. It's completely fucked, right? It's just a twisted, messed up fucking system. And, it's necessary. I mean, I don't know how many things are necessary to a civilization, but, you go back to the Bible and all this shit and the circumcision and, the stuff I've been covering with the Old Testament, all these things. Where just evil is run. People do weird, evil shit. Crucifixion, crucifying people, torturing them. All the weird shit people do. Crossing fucking lines of civil behavior. Like things animals don't do, right? I mean, people are the fucking worst. And our civilization's built on that evil shit. A debt-based economic system and all these things. The depravity is, what people will engage in and what they will enjoy is sick. And all the horror movies and all the things you see out there, just ideas of just bad shit that goes on there, right? Artwork, like things at Picasso that comes from a place of severe sexual abuse as a child. Twisted artwork and just all the ugliness and the twisted nature and you take God's purity to purity of the divine love, spiritual love, the loving energy, God's love that manifested all the things that we see here in the perversion and turn it into an abomination. And then you expect it to be fixed. And, in the abomination, there are good things or things that we enjoy, things that aren't so bad, things that don't come from a dark place, but they are, they're part of the darkness. That's what I've been saying all along. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing here. Okay, so I was going to go with Candace Owens next, but this is great. This worked out wonderful. Because I saw something on New York Post today, which I don't usually look at anymore. I used to go to MSNBC, New York Post, Page 6 was a part of that, and then Yahoo every morning. And I just don't, it's just, I barely ever do that anymore. But I'm glad I did that, and I'll show you that in a moment. But here is part one. And so this is going to tie to the Candace Owens thing, and it's all tying into what I said at the beginning of this video, right? Me saying it was easier for me to, I feel blessed in the way that it sucks to be a truther, like it just does. And it sucks because, there's that character, there's two characters, one from the Mahabharata and named Vidura, and one from the story of the Trojan horse, right? Cassandra, who was supposed to be, I think, the second most beautiful woman in the world, and she could see the future. And nobody listened to her. Nobody fucking listened to her. She knew the future, and, it was proven, right? You call things right a couple of times. And there's a character named Vidura. In the Mahabharata, there was, and I talked about this a little bit in my video, voiceover yesterday about Bhishma, the terrible vow guy. And there was, the king couldn't procreate, he was cursed. So there's a couple times these people were cursed and couldn't procreate. And so there's a guy, he lived for thousands of years, and he was the most spiritual person alive at the time. And he was a saint with, brilliant kind of guy. But he was living out in the woods meditating, not fucking, civilized, just living out by himself in the woods. And he came into the kingdom and they wanted him to impregnate. The king had two wives. And he wanted him to impregnate both wives. They were both ovulating, because they were living in the same place. And he's like, I'm a mess. I'm gross. I haven't bathed. And he's been living out in the wood for hundreds of years. And they're like, no, you got to do it right now. So he's disgusting. And these are, prim and proper, royal women, these people. And the first woman's so disgusted by him, she closes her eyes. And her son is blind, born blind. The second one turns completely pale, and her son's born without pigmentation, right? So the Kaurava's Dhritarashtra becomes one of the blind kings, and Pandu, he himself gets cursed when he procreates, and if he procreates, he's going to die, same kind of thing, and he ends up dying. So his sons are the Pandus, right? And so these are the two warring factions, and they say, well, just in case these women don't get pregnant, I want you to bang their maid too. And so he sleeps with her, and she's just like into it because she's really spiritual, and she can't believe that she gets to bear the child of such a elevated soul, right? And her son is like a bastard child in a way, and brothers to these other guys, and his name is Vidur, and he has divine sight, like he can see everything. He has he can read the Akashic records. He has 100% omniscience, and you think that they would take advantage of that. Right, but nobody listens to the guy, right? So, this is anybody who sees things and can tell, truths. People just don't fucking listen to. Like we all have these, all of us in the truth community experience this. People just don't want to hear it. People just want to hear the stuff that they want to hear, and the stuff that makes them uncomfortable. The stuff that is, the good stuff, right? Because the good stuff, the stuff that makes you uncomfortable is the stuff you need to hear about. But, even within the matrix of the system, prophecies only are good after they're proven right. Oh, yeah, that guy was right about this, but we're not going to listen to him next time, right? So this kind of thing. Being prophetic. And all of us who are a little bit prophetic or whatever. And so, I don't even know where I was going with that. But anyways, so, it came up, Tucker Carlson released a video, which I showed you a little bit about. Deep State tried to take out Trump. This clown from Value Attainment. Now, pretty much everybody knows that the guy, one day ago, Tucker just exposed massive FBI cover-up. So he did an interview, and they're all covering this, right? The FBI hiding something about Thomas Crooks. And so, who is Thomas Crooks? So this is his video here, Tucker Carlson Network. And I showed you a little clip of this. And they're like, they know nothing about this guy. And they talked about it. And I covered it already a couple videos ago. When the obvious answer is, well, fucking, it's fake, right? Everyone knows it's fake. Everyone knows this thing by now is fake. Like, I called it out immediately because I saw it. I'm like, this is WWE fucking... I didn't even know Trump had a relationship with WWE. And everything that I said about it was confirmed the following week when Trump rolled out all these WWE people, including Hulk Hogan, and his WWE style thing with his fucking Band-Aid on his ear, right? All this stuff here. And so... instead of calling this thing fake, they have just brought it back up. Like all these people are covering it. And so then Megyn Kelly, this video was recommended today. Why was the FBI reveal so little about the attempted Trump assassination with Thomas Crooks with Glenn Greenwald? So these people are all piece of shit shills because they all have to fucking know. Or if they don't know, then what good is it listening to them? Either you know and you're covering it up, or you're just worthless. Like no one should listen to you, because if you can't see through this thing, then you're not a fucking truther. You're nothing, right? But these are shills being shills, right? So let's just listen to a little bit of this here.
14th, and later that night on the 14th, Kash Patel tweeted, it's long, but I'll give you the highlights. There were over 480 FBI employees involved in this investigation. They conducted over 1,000 interviews, addressed over 2,000 public tips, analyzed data from 13 seized digital devices, reviewed nearly...
No, wait, let's go back here. No BS, no agenda, no fear. She's a very fearful person. She has this... Her cadence in her voice sounds like she's somebody who's scared. Like she has fear in her voice. So no fear. Like these are all... You get rid of the no's. Like... No, you should never do anything, like you should never have a goal, or people should not set goals with the negative. Like, I got to quit smoking, right? The goal should be, I want to be healthy. I'm going to work to be healthy. Like you're focusing on health. You're not focused on the fact that you want a cigarette, right? No is not a word that is understood by the deeper levels of your consciousness. So, no BS. Well, this is total BS. No agenda. Of course she has an agenda. And she's a very fearful person. No fear.
Public tips, analyzed data from 13 seized digital devices, reviewed nearly 500,000 digital files, collected, processed, synchronized hundreds of hours of video footage, analyzed financial activity from 10 different accounts, examined data associated with 25 social media or online forum accounts, examined over...
Okay, so I have this meme of Joe Rogan realizing that Trump doesn't have any fucking sign of a bullet wound or any scar or anything on his ear. Because he wasn't fucking shot, right? Let's show you that here, because that's going to come up in the next segment.
Right over here.
Oh, it's a tiny little
See,
mark.
it zicked right there.
Yeah. But it healed up pretty fucking good.
Well, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's little.
No, you didn't
it's
get
a little bit.
cauliflower ear.
No. The point of the bullet was a
Boy.
little of the ass, but you see the thing's taken off a little bit.
So, first of all, this is Trump's signature moment, right? When Trump pumped his fist and said, fight, 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 after receiving a bullet to the ear, he looked like a badass. Like the guy from the Young Turks was saying, as much as I hate Trump, that was a badass moment. Like everybody was talking about what a badass moment was. And it was completely fake and staged. We'll get to that in a moment. Well, hopefully I'll remember to I'll put the video clip of Trump saying that right after the Megyn Kelly thing. You've already just seen it. The clip of Trump and Joe Rogan, him saying there was nothing there. His doctor said it was less than 2 centimeters because there was no cut. It had already stopped bleeding by the time he stood up because it was fake blood. Right? See, he went for the big kahuna. This is the big kahuna right here, right? This is the big kahuna. Like, they could have fake shot him and sent a bullet by his head and, whatever, kill somebody else, any kind of thing like that, right? Here's the shooter here, right? So here's the shooter. That's the picture of the shooter. And Trump was looking this way, back over here towards, where Trump's located. The bullet, they're saying, just grazed his ear. And it would have been, the angle has to be perfect, right? I covered this in so many videos. I have a whole playlist, Ketchupgate, all this stuff I have. That, they're trying to re-invoke this Ketchupgate thing. And Band-Aid Gate, because Trump wore this giant Band-Aid. We know for sure Trump was lying when he wore the big Band-Aid during his convention speech Thursday, almost a full 6 days after the shooting attempt. I think the thing happened on Saturday, and on Wednesday or Thursday he came out. I think it was Thursday, and gave his speech. Doesn't matter, because he was wearing a big maxi pad, and the cut had already healed by the time he stood up. Because there's no cut. But, if there was one, there was no bleeding. There was no, there was no blood coming out. He's walking. Here, the blood's all dry. At this moment, the blood's all dry. And so Trump would have to be looking directly at this guy. And he was looking at a chart that was over here. That's why he said looking at the chart saved his life. But he was looking at the chart. The guy wouldn't have access. The bullet wouldn't have access to his ear. Plus, you can see the guy. He's sitting up here with a rifle. And the counter snipers are right behind Trump over here. They have a shorter shot to this guy than this guy has at Trump. And he's able to get off 8 shots, even though the guy was up there with a rangefinder and a rifle, and people were yelling at it. And the guys, the counter snipers, decided not to fire. And there was the one place where there could be somebody, like these rooftops. And so it's a bullshit story. It doesn't add up. There's, and the thing about it is, Trump is the most braggadocious motherfucker in the face of the earth. Here's this guy. This guy's walking around with a rangefinder, right? This fucking little dweeb. This patsy, right? And he was walking around with a rangefinder, and they didn't, he went through the fucking security with the rangefinder, was walking around with this equipment. The whole thing's completely fucked, right? Like he's, there's things that have to go into taking a shot like that. But this is Trump's biggest moment, right? The most braggadocious person we've ever seen. The guy is always tooting his own horn, right? That's a weird saying, and Clinton's horn. And the guy brags about everything. And you think he wouldn't be bragging about this constantly, and then he also investigates anybody that even fucking hints at a criticism. Rosie O'Donnell tweets something, and the guy fucking goes after her and slanders her and sues her, and anybody who dares to challenge this motherfucker, Trump goes at him with fucking guns a-blazing. When he would have these boardroom things in the where he'd fire people in the boardroom on The Apprentice, he loved when people went at it. And he would, reward the person who was most vicious. And he's like, you're getting killed right now. When a person would just make up shit about the other person. And Trump, he could watch the video and see who was really the piece of shit at the project. But he liked to have these people argue it out. And it was good TV. And Trump really loves that shit. Like, Trump thinks it's losing. Like he's losing to Rosie O'Donnell. And you got to make sure he has the last word. And, all that shit when he gets into these feuds. And so he goes after all these governmental agencies. He's going after all these people that did him wrong. And yet he's not going after the Secret Service and all the people that failed him on that day. They never even talk about it, right? And this is, again, like this is the moment where he looks like a badass. It turns out that, there was no cut and he was a faker and it's bullshit. It's staged and he's a bad actor in WWE. And so here, American deserves answers about Thomas Crooks and why he tried to assassinate Trump. Caroline Levitt, these questions are definitely deserving of answers. I understand why the public wants the answers, and I believe the president does too. She said Levitt recently told Miranda Devine on her Pod Force One cast. And so, this is, the New York Post is owned by Rupert Murdoch. Here's the other part of this. American deserves to know about Thomas Crooks and why he tried to assassinate Trump, Levitt said. And so, here's this thing here. Look at him go. Look at this fucking dweeb go. Does anybody believe that guy fucking pulled that thing off? He outsmarted the police and the Secret Service, like hundreds of people that are there to do security. And she's on the podcast here. Okay, so why is this story coming back up, right? Why are they talking about this now? Well, first of all, they are releasing the Jeffrey Epstein files. And so they're trying to remind you of what a hero Trump was and what a victim he was. And they want you to talk about this. No one gives a shit, right? Nobody cares about this. Okay, so Megyn Kelly's video has 56,000 views. Tucker Carlson's original video's got 1.6 million views. I don't know if that's accurate. Benny Johnson, this gay dude, 51,000 views, right? Tucker Carlson, something hiding Thomas Crooks is the one I saw, the short video, 168,000 views. Glenn Beck, 300,000 views. This other one, this guy Redacted, 2015, 215,000 views. A few of these other ones. This guy here, 147,000 views, right? So these guys get a lot of views. These are popular shill fucking pieces of shit, right? And I mean, if I really took things personally, I called this thing right the day it happened, right? Shouldn't I be like someone who, and again, I know I'm being suppressed in these things, but even if I wasn't, just because of the way that I come across and my, whatever, the stuff that I say here, and then also the Christian stuff and the, doing the spirituality and these things, I mean, I'll say something to piss pretty much everyone off here, and being truthful and being right about it. But being right means nothing, right? Being there in the beginning, being there first, being there, at the beginning of something and being right from the get-go means nothing. These people wander in late, and these guys aren't wandering in late. They're still pushing the bullshit story. But there's a lot more dumb fucks out there who want to be lied to. I mean, in the truth community and everywhere else. They want to be lied to. They don't want somebody telling them the truth. But anyway, there's no real interest in this because, people care about the Epstein files, and this isn't going to save Trump. And this shows you how big a shill he is and she is, right, for doing this. And, of course, these are the people that Candace Owens is constantly referencing because Candace Owens is, full of shit with the stuff that she's doing, which I'll get into in a moment here. But these are the people that are all part of the club, right? They're carrying water for Trump. They know the Epstein. These are supposed to be Epstein people. When the Epstein files are just about to be released, why are you talking about Thomas Crooks? And these guys are supposed to be friends with Charlie Kirk. Why aren't you talking? Tucker Carlson has hinted that the investigation looks pretty shady, but he's not supporting Candace Owens' bullshit stuff that she's doing. And Megyn Kelly, is not attacking Candace Owens, but she's not defending her. And so why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you if you were big Charlie Kirk fans? Why wouldn't you do all that shit, right? Why wouldn't you be like, hey, this is bullshit, right? All these kind of things. And, none of that shit's happening because, it's all fucking done by design. These are all operatives who are putting out information based on what Trump needs and what, they're trying to do to discredit or distract from Epstein and not even talk about Charlie Kirk, who himself was a piece of shit, right? So, the guy who was one of the biggest shills out there. And so, in all of these things, it's done in a coordinated manner. And it's not working because people don't give a shit about this guy, right? Why didn't they care about him when it happened? Because they knew it was fake. Deep down, everybody knew this was fake. So this is the video from yesterday, Monday. Today's Tuesday, the 18th. This was the 17th video. It's got 1.5 million views. It'll be up around 2 when it's done. And there's an audit that some guy does. Candace Owens clips some of this guy's video. He's done an audit of TPUSK. It's pretty incriminating, and he kind of blames Erika, which I'll show you a little bit of that as we weave in through this narrative. But what this is about here is Candace Owens' connection to all these people. Charlie Kirk, who is a piece of shit. Tucker Carlson is a piece of shit. Megyn Kelly's a piece of shit. Donald Trump, who's a piece of shit. Andrew Tate is a piece of shit. And then she's talking about how all these other people are pieces of shit, right? In the Republican fucking manosphere, all this stuff, all this weird shit, this right wing, these are the QB, the QB element of the right wing, the Trumpers, the MAGA people. And there's infighting, but they all suck, right? Not that the Democrats don't suck, because that's how binary fucks think. You dumb binary fucks who, when I said, all these, the MAGA sucks, you're like, well, we're better than Joe Biden. You say stupid shit like that. And, I don't think I have that many viewers that do that, right? This is, unsolvable. This is a corrupt system. This is a debauched system. All the people in it, all the power players, all the people with the microphone, they're all self-interested. They're all, trying to survive. They're all dealing with demonic forces that control them and manage them. And so let's get to it here. I just want to show you what I meant. It's good that they try to, that was a shill operation to bring up Thomas Crooks. Why would you bring up Thomas Crooks when Epstein files are finally being released? Why would you bring him up now? Why would you say, all right, let's change the subject completely? Why the fuck would you do that? When Trump could have the Epstein files, he could call Pam Bondi and go, release the Epstein files today. But he's going to make it go through the House and the Senate, then he's going to sign the bill. It's going to take weeks. And they're going to throw one distraction after another. Who knows? We might be in World War III to stop that shit from hitting, right? The wag the dog. Who knows what Trump was willing to do to keep the fucking focus off of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. He's that fucking selfish, right? And trying to bring up this bullshit fucking Ketchupgate story. And these are people that she talks about positively all the time. One of my viewers, well, let me get into it here.
All right, you guys, happy Monday. A little bit of history for you today. It was after the public execution of sitting President JFK in 1963 that the CIA established Operation Mockingbird. Deep state assassinations require deep state solutions.
Okay, so the deep state's a bullshit term because it's all a deep state and she's a part of it. They're all part of it. All these people, they're all complicit in the whatever's called the deep state. And without the deep state, we have no fucking country. Because evil shit has to be done to keep an evil system going. That's all you need to know. This all this bullshit about the truth community, that's all you need to know. You take down the evil system, you take down the whole system. It's like that face hugger in the Alien movies that has acid as blood and, it'll kill the host. If you try to cut the thing off the host, that alien that's planting a a little embryo inside the stomach of a person, it's a parasite. And if you kill the parasite, you kill the host. That's what we have a parasitic system, and you kill the parasite, and the host goes along with it.
They spent an offensive amount of money to control the press and to control the narrative, to put an end to the public asking common sense questions about what actually transpired on that fateful day in Dallas.
Okay, so we know that only time, when all the people that could go to jail and when the damage is no longer palpable, because, after 65 years, they finally admitted that they fucked Iran. The CIA fucked Iran. And everyone kind of knew it by then, that the CIA went in there, took out a moderate leader in Mossadegh on the behest of the British Petroleum and maybe to whatever extent Israel. Like this is in the 1960s, around the same time period. And they fucked that country up like basically permanently. At least, now it's still fucked up from that, taking out a moderate leader. Iran was a country that was, a huge country with lots of resources. And the leader, the guy, Mossadegh, wanted to split oil profits 50-50. British Petroleum, which developed the oil industry there, would get 50% of the profits. And they were getting 80, and they were getting 80, and he wanted to renegotiate the deal. And now British Petroleum's getting nothing, right? But they went in and destroyed the guy and got him out and put in the Shah of Iran, and all the things happened with the Iranian hostage crisis and all that shit, right? And then they finally admitted to it. 60 some odd years later, about 10 years ago, they finally admitted, yeah, we did this. Because it doesn't matter any fucking more. But RFK, they're not admitting to that. The moon landing, they're not admitting to that. There's things that they just can't admit to. That assassination was carried out by, some kind of CIA, whatever deep state kind of thing. And then you have to realize, well, why did everyone go along with it, right? When people knew that the official story was bullshit. And if that's official story was bullshit, then what about Charlie Kirk? What about any number of these other things? So then the government has no credibility. Because if the government was fucked up then, it's more fucked up now, right? Like everybody knows it. But anyways, there's no deep state. It's a silly fucking term, right?
To put it simply, the deep state declared a psychological warfare campaign on the people. In effect, their soldiers were the journalists and the writers. Their goal, obviously, to get people to just stop asking questions, to almost criminalize asking questions via methods of gaslighting. Fast forward to 2025, and they're running the exact same playbook. Charlie Kirk was assassinated in broad daylight, and they immediately deployed their troops to criminalize asking questions. What are you?
So this is, I got annoyed by this. I'll tell you, you'll see in a second here. Because, these people suck. These people all suck, but there's something that they're saying here that's true, that Candace Owens is playing fucking, she's talking about gaslighting. When a person lies to their audience, that's like when all these people, including myself, anybody who's doing something like this, lying to your audience, when you lie in your videos, you're hurting your audience, right? The lie hurts your audience, your supporters, your fans, whatever you want to call them, more than anybody else. Like the lie doesn't hurt. Let's say somebody tells a lie about Trump, right? Like, whatever it is, or a lie about Clinton or any of these people. And they know it's a lie and they tell it. And you think it hurts Clinton and Trump, and maybe it does to whatever extent, but it really hurts the audience. Like, Trump could sue you for slander, whatever, right? And say the damages have been done, like he's doing with whoever it is, the BBC and CBS and ABC. But the lies really, they hurt the people that are watching it, right? They're telling you things that are false that become things that you interpret and internalize. And those lies build up and warp your sense of reality. So the crime is being committed against your audience. So when you're presenting information, she does it in a very dramatic, manipulative way, which we'll get into. So let's watch this thing here first, and I'll explain more.
Supposed to take from the everyone. You know what I mean? I think the implication was dramatic, and then I think a lot of people reading the tweets would assume that she meant Erika Kirk.
Either Erika Kirk is evil and was in on it, or Candace Owens is an evil.
I think that what Candace Owens is doing right now is evil. It is evil what she was doing right now.
Post Charlie, there was so much unity, so much excitement, so much resurgence in faith and newfound interest in faith, and that now there is discord, so many distractions, and that is just like Satan, who comes to steal, kill, and destroy. He is called the great accuser. He is the sower of discord, the author of confusion.
The reason I am
Boom, Satan, fucking Satan. They're calling her Satan.
On things is I'm an eyewitness to events, and they said don't comment on things because anything you say can mess that up. I don't want to mess up any trial for the person who did this.
That's 1,000% right.
But Candace Owens is well within her rights to suggest certain things and all this, and she has the right to free speech and all that. That's fine. She's right to ask questions. I just think it is hurtful and not helpful when you cross a line to strongly suggest somebody's guilty of something for which you have no evidence.
Challenge accepted, Frank Turek. Let's go Max today. Welcome back to Candace.
Welcome back. She's going to go Max. Fucking Max. She's going fucking Max today, you guys. She's bringing in the fucking Max.
Pastor Rob McCoy, let's not forget him too, because he's the spawn of naval psychological intelligence, psychological campaigns upon the public. And here's what he has to say about matters. Take a listen.
I want to read you a passage out of Romans. It says in Romans 12:15 and 16, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble, and do not be wise in your own opinion. I think that's a fitting verse. I mean, we're hearing all kinds of speculation about Charlie and what he believed and didn't believe, and I just have to tell you.
So if Jesus died and everyone's grieving and there's a conspiracy behind his death, you're not supposed to look into that? You're just supposed to grieve and keep everyone with the same mind? Like, it's just silly. The Bible sucks. I've talked about this, right? This is a weird guy. Like,
it's not the time for it. It's a time to minister to the family. They have a husband and a father to bury. We have a friend to bury, a brother to bury, a son to bury. And the world is mourning. And this is not the time to get clicks. It's not time to build your empire. It's time to just simply weep with those who weep. And it's time to just humble yourself and not make it all about you. It's about the Lord.
It's about the Lord.
You hear that, Christians? Asking questions is just, it's not about you. I mean, is there anything that they didn't try? You're making money off of this. It's unbiblical. Charlie wouldn't want this. His family is grieving. Not right now. Let's at least wait a couple of weeks. It's going to ruin the case. You'll get into heaven as long as you don't think about it. If you don't think about what happened on 9/10, then you're guaranteed a slot into heaven.
Okay, so I want to move forward here. Let me see if she says this here. She says something I want to...
You know, I used to really lament the fact that I grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. Seriously.
Okay, so this is not... Let me find the next part I want to cover here. So this is the part I want to talk about here. So she talks about how that she's grateful she grew up poor. She didn't grow up with a silver spoon in her mouth because it gave her... She had to have survival instincts, and she gave her the ability to read people, right?
Sense. Basic survival skills. It requires gut instinct. And I had to learn at a very young age to read people. I think that's my superpower, actually. Just being able to look at someone and sense danger or sense deceit. I can just look at Rob McCoy, and for me, it's a no. It's obviously a no.
Okay. So if that's her superpower, then she sucks because she's not very good at it. Like, this is something that I do well. Anybody watching my videos would know that, right? That I just had this natural ability to read people. You know, I was trained as a counselor, as a preceptor to read people's spiritual energy, you know, in an instant, whatever it is, right? But like, it just, information just pours into me, like it just, or feelings or whatever it is. Like, I just have a sense of people. And if she's claiming that's her superpower, then she's, like, I just showed you how Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly are pieces of shit. They're shills. They're disinformation agents. You know, she's always using them as references as people on her side. You know, people that she admires, right? She often links herself to Tucker Carlson. But Tucker Carlson, why in the world would he, at this particular time, bring up Thomas Crooks when Jeffrey Epstein, which something that he cares about, and Megyn Kelly care about, and all that his fans care about, the files are about to be released, and his good friend Charlie Kirk, like I said earlier, there's questions about his assassination, but you're going to revisit that thing, and nobody gives a shit about it. It's not going to catch. It's just what shills do, right? And he's done so many other things, him and Megyn Kelly. But Charlie Kirk was worse than a piece of shit. Like, this is all predicated that Charlie Kirk was a great man, and he was a good person, and they assassinated him, and he was doing good things. But she herself admits, and she's going to talk about how much Charlie Shekels loved his shekels, his donors, twice in this video. She's going to talk about it. Now, he bailed on her, basically, disavowed her when she went out and criticized a genocide. And his job, she talks about gaslighting. It's one of her favorite fucking terms. She talks about gaslighting. And Charlie Kirk was gaslighting his audience, right? And so when you do this kind of thing, when you did this work, let's say you say something, a lie about Trump, and Trump sues you for slander. The idea is that you said something about Trump that's not true, and that hurt him in some way, financially or whatever else, right? Well, the real damage is to your audience. When you willfully lie, when you willfully tell your audience stuff that's not true, that goes inside people's internal worlds, and it distorts their lens of reality, right? And so all this stuff with deep state shit that they say, all these fucking terms, all this kind of stuff. And Charlie Kirk was going to his audience, which is young people. He was being paid hundreds of millions of dollars a year, $100 million a year by Israel, building this huge thing. We're going to get into the accounting too in a bit. Building this mega corporation, this mega nonprofit, and then using that money to go into these college areas and tell kids who are rightfully upset, who are having like an ethical dilemma, and bully them in some way out of their belief that a genocide was bad. Like, he had all the blood of the Palestinian children is on Charlie Kirk's hands and Trump's hands, Charlie Shekels and Donnie Half Shekels, right? And she was pimping for both of them. And even after he disavowed her, she stayed friends with him and was grieving his death, but he's a piece of shit. He's the biggest piece of shit as any of these people at Turning Point. He was running a corrupt organization, and it was lying to his audience, right? In a way, bringing in God to it and all these things that you just saw Pastor Rob McCoy. They're all pieces of shit, right? And so, and I had the same reaction with her. The other thing is, one of my viewers said that Andrew Tate, I call him Andrew Tate, was good friends with her husband. And she's defended Andrew Tate a few times, as she did with Michael Jackson. Again, I don't know what's going on with that. But, both Andrew Tate and Charlie Kirk, when I first heard from them. So when Charlie Kirk, my wife sent me a video. Neither one of us knew who he was. And he was talking about how Epstein and Mossad were connected. And everything he said, I didn't disagree with any of it, in terms of what he was saying in that one short clip. But I looked at him, I go, this guy's a real piece of shit. My wife was like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah. And then, of course, the shilling and the shekeling and all the information came out. But I had no idea. I just knew. I could just tell. And Andrew Tate, he was being prosecuted for human trafficking. And somebody sent me a clip where Andrew Tate this is my first introduction to him. And he was talking about how, these incels, these kids that were going to him, these, involuntarily celibate, like these kids who couldn't get laid. There's a great Netflix show about this called Adolescence. But, he's pandering to these kids, or this is his audience. But he talked about how he was running a sex line. And he was having these prostitutes or these women go online or talk to men and chat with them and get them to send all their money to Andrew Tate, right? To con these guys, to catfish them out of their money. And these were his audiences. So this is a guy who's being accused of human trafficking, and he's bragging about using hookers or these girls to pretend that they really like these guys, these desperate guys who couldn't get laid, and win them over and seduce them, and then steal their money. But then he said something hilarious, like, he owned himself the same way that Ben Shapiro owned himself when he said that his wife said that he didn't ever have to worry about wet pussy, right? Andrew Tate said this. This is this man's man. He said, these girls don't know how to seduce men. I would have to grab the keyboard. And then he was seducing men, catfishing them, which is a very gay act, right? Where he would, he would say sexual things and say all these things to these men so he could con them out of their money. He was like, I had to teach these women how to seduce men. And and he's a real piece of shit. And she, is defending him as she's defending Charlie Kirk. And I could say I had the same reaction to her and all these people. Like, I immediately see them, and I'm like, I don't, I no. Like, whatever. There's just nothing there. And it isn't specific. I'm just like, these are, I just wouldn't want to talk to these people, right? Because they're not good people. And all these people that she's showing, they're all like this. All these Republican people. A lot of them are gay. We're going to get to here. Let's get to this guy.
Same thing, by the way, I should mention with Steven Crowder. I have never been a fan. He just always gave me the energy of a pathological liar. I trust my gut. I don't trust influencer camp.
He's gay. There's a great video out there where his wife videotaped him, and then he comes off so gay. Like, he's just so gay. He loves to dress up like women. He does that a number of times. He's just a piece of shit, right? But what they say about her is true here.
Pains. I don't trust celebrities because they're raising their arms and they glitter and shine and they tell me that I should roll up my sleeves and get a vaccine. I don't listen to any of that. I trust my gut instincts.
Yeah, well, why didn't your gut tell you about Trump or Charlie Kirk or Tucker or yourself, or Andrew Tate? Like, it's a thing, right? Like, if you're gonna say this is your superpower, then you have to fucking talk about the times your gut didn't work, or the fact that you were shilling for Israel and being handled by them, and you didn't know until, the genocide, and you asked a few questions because you wanted to defend Israel more because there was all that Israeli money coming into Turning Point USA, US gay.
Ways. And my gut started to tell me that they suddenly began panicking when I discovered the Egyptian planes. They did what we now term a pre-bunking, right? A pre-bunking is when you say something casual and then they send out like a full fleet against you to not even actually debunk you, but they're just so extreme in not debunking you that they even lie about.
Okay, so what she's talking here about is what she's going to show this with this guy, whatever his name is. She's going to show you these guys accusing her. What they're doing is reading between the lines, which is what she's doing here. Okay, so she's saying that she started talking about these planes. And the planes are just, it's like going down the fucking rabbit hole to nowhere. They don't need planes to assassinate Charlie Kirk, right? They don't need any of that shit. How hard would it be to assassinate Charlie Kirk when everybody is involved? They need a guy in the audience with a gun, whatever it is, or some sniper, or whatever. They can hire someone from America. They don't got to bring in people from Egypt that are really from Israel, and they don't have to bring in multiple planes and track Erika Kirk, which she's going to talk about in a bit, right? And so it's silly that this planes is such a big part of the story. It's just one of the things that just adding another fucking layer of mystery to the whole thing, right? Well, we got the planes now. I'm fucking tracking that. We got the 411 on the planes, right? It's silly. But what she's saying here is that when she mentioned the planes, they attacked her. So she's saying that, because they're not saying that. And then what they're saying is when she says everyone, she means Erika Kirk. So she's doing the same thing they're doing, reading between the lines. But when she does it, it's cool. When they do it, it's crazy, right? So let's get into that here.
What you said, and that lie tends to actually foreshadow something that they don't want you to know. So I'll give you a perfect example. On October 11th, when I infamously tweeted about the Egyptian military plane that left Provo on the morning of Charlie Kirk's assassination, I got the time zone wrong by a couple of hours. And they completely overreacted. I mean, an account that didn't even exist wrote, the time zone is wrong. Next thing you know, it was trending. And they pretended it had been officially debunked just because the departure.
Okay, so that's whatever it is. Let's move forward here. Okay, so let's move over to here.
sign up for my private book club that I kept on Tuesday. And then they took out a clip of that book club, from that book club, and accused me of accusing Erika of murdering her husband. I mean, they manufactured that claim out of thin air, and then they made it go viral. They sent it out to all the right people, Steven Crowder, right? Everyone suddenly making videos saying that because I said he was betrayed by everyone, obviously what I meant was Erika Kirk murder.
Yeah, that's what I took it as. I'm like, if you guys watched my video when I covered this, when she said that she was betrayed by everyone, the number one person would have to be Erika. Now, I said this back then when she said it, but I also said this. And, I'll say it now. I don't have to quote myself. But, if you've been watching my videos, what they're mining for here is victim consciousness, right? What they're looking for is, like Erika Kirk saying, the cries of this widow we heard around the world. For what? Like, you've already forgiven the guy that did do it, the patsy. And so you're in line with the people that really did it, if he's even dead. All these things. If you were even married, right? It's not like, it doesn't even look like you were married or you have kids. But they're looking for victim consciousness when Trump is assassinated, or was attempted assassination. The outrage, the deep state's trying to take him down. They're trying to kill our guy. They're mining for victim consciousness. And who gets to be self-righteous? Who gets to wield the most victim consciousness is Erika Kirk. Who benefits the most? She's one of the people that benefits the most. She's taken over a company that she obviously wants to take over, right? And so, when she said everyone, and she's the leader of TPUS Gay, she's the CEO now, they have to get her. If Erika Kirk is really grieving and she goes after the people that really killed him, they lose control of that narrative, right? If Erika Kirk comes out and says, I think Trump fucking tried to kill my husband, they can say she's crazy or mentally ill, but, this is a grieving widow, right? So she has to be on board. They have to control her. They have to get her to sign off on this. Of course they do. And she's the big whale. She's the fucking star of the show. She's the fucking one that everybody wants to get exposed. She's the bad actress. She's the shitty one that all these people could see through. And so this was, to me, her way of saying everyone included Erika Kirk, right? No one should have doubted that. The same way that she's saying that they're doing this when I mentioned the airplanes, but they didn't say that. You're reading between the lines. Like everyone else was reading between the lines when you said everyone, right? And so, like, it's silly. Like, it's just fucking disingenuous. Of course you mean Erika Kirk.
Her husband. And this was all happening because I mentioned the Egyptian plane. I am certain of it.
But just like they're certain that you meant Erika Kirk? Like, why do you get to be certain? But you're certain because you have a superpower that fucking only works on certain scumbags, right?
And so that you can look backward and really see how these psychological campaigns work, I want you to watch this clip of Steven Crowder trying to convince people that despite the words that are coming out of my mouth, they shouldn't listen to what I'm saying. He actually knows what I really meant, which is something that I didn't say. And here it is. Here's that clip.
But you watch this clip in its entirety, and it seems pretty blatant that she's saying, and people are interpreting it this way, which is also important, that the Trump administration, not whatever it was, we went from underground Jew tunnels, Mossad, the Trump administration killed Charlie Kirk.
Just really needed to just take a breather and really process everything that happened with Charlie and what it kind of means in terms of where we are. And I think it is a circumstance where we just know that he was truly betrayed in one of the most egregious ways that I think I've ever seen.
She almost looks like a different person. I mean, like, I don't know if she's using a filter here.
It has made me lose faith in politics. It has made me fully lose faith in Trump. And my heart aches for the fact that he gave so much of his life to Trump and to politics. And
no, he gave it to Israel because they were paying $100 million, like that part, which makes him a piece of shit. So who gives a shit if he got killed because he was responsible, like he was culpable for a genocide that was happening and so much more shit. He was betraying. He was a Judas. He wasn't a Christ. He was a Judas. He was a Pharisees. You know, he was a shekel taker, right? He took the 30 pieces of silver.
They just were like, nope, that is it. It serves us or it doesn't serve us, and we want to move on. And so here's a holiday. Bro, if they try to give me a holiday, what is with them giving people a holiday after they kill them? Why is that a thing? You know what I mean? They're like, oh, Martin Luther King, what about this holiday? What about this boulevard? Anyways, let me knock it off. Like, they're going to give Charlie Kirk a boulevard. They already did. They did in Israel. They gave him freaking boulevard. It's like, as soon as they give you a boulevard and a holiday, they definitely killed you. Okay, there's no question. They killed you. There's no way. That's like their signature thing. It's like that's what they do. It's the Fed signature. It's how they sign off after they murder you. They're like holiday and a boulevard. And it's never on a nice side of town either. Like Charlie Kirk Boulevard is not going to be a nice side of town. Anyways, I will be back on the 27th, you guys. Thank you guys for all the support throughout these couple of weeks, these last really kind of 6 weeks since Charlie died. And we will see you guys then.
Well, let me first be tactful here and tell you that outrageous claims, and this is an outrageous claim, require outrageous evidence.
Oh, shit. This guy is so effeminate. You know, he loves to dress up in glitter. He dressed up, like he just dressed up as women, just like, he goes in, he poses as women going into a fertility clinic. And he's just like these Republican guys who, I don't know if they're homosexual. And again, I'm not insulting gay people. I'm insulting their hypocrisy, right? Like, it's congruent. There's a term, in psychological term, egocentonic or ego-dystonic. Egocentonic is something that agrees with your whole vibe, your whole belief system. It's egocentonic to be gay or to be pro-gay and be liberal, right? Everyone understands that. But for Republicans and Christians, it's not egocentonic to be gay. And it's not egocentonic to marry a woman when you're gay. It's not egocentonic to talk about gay people in a negative way and be gay yourself, right? And, it's a lot more in terms of being congruent, there's another way of saying this, for Will Smith to be gay, but then he had this beard marriage where he's covering it up. But it's way worse for this guy and these other people, TPUS gay. They're effeminate, right? And even if they're not gay, they're like metrosexual, primping, just the whole thing. Like just not what you're supposed to be as a right-wing guy, right? Not like a man's man, a man's man, but, and so there's that. And this guy sucks. But, his interpretation of what she said, let's go back to this.
Of course, as is par for the course, none has been presented. You know who's really close to President Trump, and you know who people are now saying stood to gain? Well, Charlie's wife, Erika Kirk, who has now been put, Candace with that language, with this accusation, has put the wife of Charlie Kirk, and she'll say, that's not what I tried to do. It is. It's the result. Erika Kirk in the crosshairs. There's no middle ground here right now. Either Erika Kirk is evil and was in on it, or
she is. Like fucking none of these fucking guys want to say it. Erika Kirk had to be captured before doing this. Or she planned it. Like who the fuck knows what's going on here, right? And I'm going to show you, let's get to her comment on this.
Candace Owens is an evil.
No matter how many times I watch that clip of me talking about Martin Luther King Boulevard and Charlie Kirk Boulevard, I do not get from that Erika Kirk killed her husband, but that's what they went with. Those were talking points that were delivered to them. They were supposed to go out of the gate with that. The question is why? Okay. Retrospectively, that was a clue.
So she said everyone. I thought it meant Erika Kirk. How could it not include Erika Kirk, right? Let's wait. One more thing she says here.
Panicking. They were trying to pretend, me saying that everyone betrayed him, which obviously was not about Erika.
No, not obviously. Why wouldn't it include Erika? Why wouldn't it include Erika?
It also wasn't about Charlie's mother or Charlie's father or Charlie's children, but they were specifically trying to struggle session that into a slight against Erika rather than more obviously suggesting that people at Turning Point USA betrayed him, which Erika Kirk was not an employee of leading up to his death.
Okay. But right now, she's in charge of an organization. So there's two things I want to show you in this very video. Now, there's another thing that's coming up here, and I'm not going to show you that now, where she says that these planes were tracking Charlie Kirk. These Egyptian planes. There were one Egyptian plane was going wherever he went. But then one of her viewers found that it wasn't Charlie that was tracking, it was Erika. So she doesn't go on about that, but it kind of implicates Erika is connected to these planes that are these Egyptian planes that are really Israeli planes that are carrying a team of assassins. They're going to take Charlie Kirk down, and this is the whole thing, right? Whatever she's implying. Like, she implies a lot. And so that's a part that I may or may not get to that. If she says that, we'll see that. But here's the other piece, the other two pieces here.
Connect that dot there. And like I said, there is more I know about those planes. But you're a move, Turning Point USA, because that's the last time you're going to have me gaslit about something and sit by idly and pretend you know nothing. It's interesting, too, because in a typical scenario, when somebody's murdered in broad daylight and they have like, $100 million organization behind them, it's common sense that you should check the people that work at that organization. Like, that's like the first people that you should begin to investigate. So we reject your naval intelligence psychological operation where you tell us that that's a weird thing to do, okay? It's always somebody close to you.
Like the wife. I mean, it's always the spouse they look at first, right? You guys get that. Like, when there's a domestic, somebody dies, they always look at their immediate circle of people. Like if it's married, it's a husband. If it's a wife, it's the husband. If it's the husband, it's the wife. They always look at that, right? Like I said this early on. Of course, she'd be a suspect. But then you have to look at who benefits. Where's the motive? And the motive, who benefited so far? Trump, because he was about to be Jeffrey Epstein. He was about to be taken out. On day one, that's what I said. Who benefited? Well, obviously Trump, because the day before that, Trump was freaking out when they finally confirmed that note where he signed his name. He wrote that note to Jeffrey Epstein, that weird birthday book that included a bunch of pedo shit, not just Trump's. And they were running with that on the news media. And all of a sudden, Charlie Kirk dies, and all that story stops. And so, like, immediately he benefited from that. I mean, like, just instantaneously. And so that was, like, you always look at when somebody gets killed or when these stories happen, who benefits, right? Just like when they're now trying to talk about Trump's assassination, who benefits from exhuming that story that no one gives a shit about, including Trump? And so, like, well, there's that. Then who else benefited? Well, we knew Israel, because Charlie Kirk was clear that he was turning on Israel, which, Charlie Kirk did the same thing that she's doing here when she implies Erika Kirk. And you can say, okay, she can't talk about Erika Kirk directly. But then when they call her on it, the way she calls them when she reads in between the lines, and she comes out and goes, I didn't mean them at all. Fuck you. Like, of course you did. And so what Charlie Kirk was doing, we now know that he brought Megyn Kelly in and Tucker Carlson, and he brought in Dave Smith. And he said, I'm giving you a platform. I can't talk about it because I'm all shackled up. I got all this fucking shekels, so I can't go and talk about Israel, but I want you guys to do it. And the people, and he went on and whined. If you see this thing with Megyn Kelly, he goes, I didn't even say one thing about Israel. I just, brought people on, and I was just giving people freedom of speech. And of course you were sabotaging your relationship. He just didn't come out and do it because you had been taking too many shekels, right? He took too many fucking shekels to turn on Israel. He knew he couldn't do it. And they knew what he was doing. He was implying, he was giving people a platform, and he was implying that he had changed his opinion on Israel without doing it in an overt way. The same way as she's slamming Erika Kirk. So, Israel benefited when Charlie Kirk died, and Erika Kirk, who clearly didn't like being a stay-at-home mom and really likes running a company and likes being a spotlight and likes being a professional grieving widow. She clearly likes doing all these things. She wanted to be on a reality TV show, dating a gay dude, right, a closeted gay dude, which I've shown clips of that. and she wanted to be Miss USA, and she wanted to work in the public. She was constantly giving talks and speeches and doing podcasts before she was with Charlie Kirk. She likes being in front of people. She likes glomming onto Trump and J.D. Vance. She's like a celebrity chaser, clout chaser. She's all those things. And so she clearly is a part of this thing. If there's a conspiracy, then she has to be a part, for every reason I said. And for her to pretend like she's not saying that.
If there's a financial motive, yeah. And I would say an organization of that size that misses their deadline, their tax deadline for the first time, that's a little weird.
Who's the CEO when that happened? Oh, Erika Kirk. So, of course, you're saying Erika, right? So then there's a guy who does an audit, right? And the guy does this audit, and she shows it here, Candace Owens. And it's probably the only thing really worth watching. I mean, I don't know how you feel about the planes thing, but the plane thing to me is just goofy. It's a never-ending rabbit hole with no resolution. You know, this kind of lost the truthers that are just, you know, that are just like a truther episode of Lost, where she just comes up with more and more evidence that leads to nowhere, right? A story that never gets resolved and there's no effect to it. And that's the problem I have with her and the rest of these people who, you know, they don't just say what needs to be said, right? Like, the system can't be fixed. They're all pieces of shit. And if we take down the pieces of shit, the system goes with them. And then the whole system crumbles, and that's all we can do. And God clearly isn't aboard and isn't saving this. Also, you know, something that she does, you know, she recently became a member of the Catholic Church. Why the fuck would you do that when they have a history of child abuse? Worse than any other of these religious organizations. And the whole thing with the Old Testament and all the things I've read to you recently, the fucking weird shit about circumcision, abusing kids. I mean, it's just the whole thing's fucked up. Like, she's supporting these institutions that suck and are just as complicit as any of these other things, right? So this guy does this audit, and he says that the TPUSK has a lot of things that they have like left out of their, not only their audits, but public. This is a nonprofit organization, and he says it's really shady. It's legal, but it's really shady for a nonprofit organization to give money. Like in one case, they give $8.5 million to a holding company, right? So they're taking donor money. They're taking money from donors, and they put it into a holding company, and then don't show you what the holding company did with that money. So they're taking your money, you know, donation money, and then they move it, you know, into a place where you don't know what happens to it. And they have a huge payroll, but no employees. And the guy would go, well, they're obviously just, they're cutting checks for people in the organization. So they're taking huge chunks of money, $8.5 million this year, and then maybe more in different places. So this guy does the audit. And then he says something here about Erika Kirk.
USA, Inc. and its affiliates was performed by an accounting firm called Baker Tilly.
It's called USK, TPUSK.
In the notes, they explain that they audited Turning Point USA, Turning Point Action, Turning Point Endowment, America's Turning Point, and TPUSA Merch. That usually means they audited all the shell companies when they provided their opinion that the statements present fairly in all material respects. That means it is a clean audit with no problems. I wonder if Baker Tilly will provide an explanation why they can issue a flawless audit report when 3 990 forms were never filed with the IRS. And just to clarify...
So remember, he's talking about these shell companies that are also taking donor money. They're being, you know, used as shell companies, and then not being transparent of what they're doing with that money, right? So there's, you know, the big red flags here.
Baker Tilly's audit opinion letter is signed after Turning Point missed the filing date with the IRS. So there is no excuse for Baker Tilly not to mention this in their audit opinion. Erika Kirk assumed the role of CEO of Turning Point USA on September 18th, 2025, 8 days after Charlie Kirk was murdered. She has been the CEO for almost 2 months. She needs to answer these questions. If someone has lied on the 990 form, people go to jail for that. I want some explanation of why Turning Point USA sent $8.6 million to their shell company and then did not file financial statements. And Erika, I don't know who does the accounting at Turning Point, but if they have not been telling you about any of this, you need to fire your accountants immediately.
I think all valid points. And again, just to modify, it is possible that when they used that outside auditor, that they showed them all of the documentation and then they gave them a clean bill of health. And then for whatever reason, Turning Point decided not to file. It's possible. Okay. Like I said, probably a low probability, but it is plausible.
Again, so she's saying that she never once accused Erika Kirk. And when she said everyone, she didn't mean it. But clearly, but just by showing that guy say that, right? Erika Kirk is culpable in all of this. She's the CEO of the company, and she's not following through on the audit that Charlie Kirk wanted. She's not following through on any of these things, right? And so, it's just disingenuous. It's just, like I said, it's a never-ending rabbit hole, and just call Erika Kirk's bullshit. That's what everybody wants. I mean, people are, more interested in Erika Kirk than any other Turning Point U.S. gay person or even Trump in this, right? The fake grieving widow, her bad acting, people are just not about it, right? It's so fucking fake. And she's just, for her to say, oh, they're doing this because I mentioned the planes, but they didn't say that, just like you didn't say Erika. But we know what you're really talking about here, right? And then her trying to kind of, back out of this thing a little bit. They're taking money there. They're not fucking, they're not, they're taking hundreds of millions of dollars from Israel, and then they're, everyone's getting a piece of the fucking pie. This is how you sell yourself out. She said in videos that how can these people just get out and lie? She'd be having nightmares, she would have trouble. But you did this for Trump. You did the same bullshit for Trump. You did the same bullshit with Charlie Kirk. You're doing it now for Charlie Kirk without admitting what a piece of shit he is, right? Because who gives a shit if he's assassinated, if he's just an evil person that was doing the same evil shit? Nobody cares about that. There's people dying every day, right? That people don't care about. It's only that he's being portrayed as a martyr, right? He's a martyr.
That they did that, but it is just a fact that they missed the filing extension deadline. So what's going on here? Where did the $8.5 million go? And what's also compelling about this video, which we didn't show, is that...
Okay, so, with this, you get the idea. Let's go back to that other piece. I've got two more things I want to show you where she talks about Charlie Kirk there. Okay, so, I've been very clear. I see things differently. Most truthers and most people that present information here present it from one point of view, right? And maybe 2 points of view, whatever it is. I've made it clear that, I wasn't going to misrepresent the people's story in a way that, unless I'm mocking them and exaggerating a little bit, but it's, obviously just joking, and also some truth in it. But I would always know what people's point of view was. When I first started doing this, I knew I had a responsibility to my audience and to everybody else, and mostly myself, right? When people lie, everyone thinks it's inherent for other people to catch them in their lies. That's not your job, it's their job, right? Now, if they're lying to you and they're deceiving you, then yeah, of course you've got to be able to figure that shit out for your own benefit. But then that's all you have to do. People, know they're lying on some level. They know they're doing evil. And that's, they're the ones that have to do something about that. You can't do something for them. Just like Jesus can't die for your sins. You can't, if it's a criminal thing and you're on a jury or you're a policeman or, you're part of some it's part of your job, then yeah, that's your job, right? And, to whatever extent it is our job here. But really it's about, they know they're lying, right? It's not important that I know they're lying unless I'm being deceived by them. But it's important that they know they're lying. And so, in all that, you have, variation of people being a part of the system or not. And we call some people shills. I talk about being shekels. Being shackled is a thing. That's a fact. If you're receiving money from people that are wanting you to take the money so that you'll do good things for Israel, you just saw this thing with Marjorie Taylor Greene, which I'll cover in my next video, where she's talking about being called a traitor, and she talks about how Trump is doing work for foreign countries, which is really the real traitor's thing. But in terms of all these people, it's not my job to fucking, condemn them and judge them and all these things, right? And, we're all in a corrupt system, and we're all complicit in some way or another. We're all contributing to it. So, I think about it on different levels. Like, there's the official story, and then there's one truth or narrative, and then there's a spiritual narrative, multiple spiritual narratives. There's different levels to everything, right? And so for Candace Owens, I think she's better than, at least in this circumstance, than all the people she's in conflict, unless they're all working on it together. Like, this is an operation done to the American people, and they're all doing it, which is, there's a high probability that's the case. That she's not really going after them. This is just something that they're doing because this is what they're told to do, right? She's, been given, maybe not a script, but an understanding of her role here. And they're given an understanding of their role, and they're all playing their parts. And it's all something to deceive all of us. So that's, then there's that. But if she is really in conflict with these people, and you're also defined by your enemies, she's a little bit better than they are, but not significantly so, right? And she does talk about spirituality in a way, like she's, like flirting with it. And if that's sincere, that's great. Even if it isn't sincere, it's at least something, right? She talks about dreams and some of these other things. But, the big problem here is she's not willing to go full in on Trump. She's criticized Trump a little bit, but she's perpetrating a fraud of what Charlie Kirk was. Well, let me just show you this here. When we all know he's a piece of shit, right?
A photographic memory. He did.
Wait, let's go back a little bit here.
Add a lot of Snapple facts when it came to planes, something that I just do not dedicate any of my time into learning about.
So she said that Charlie Kirk knew planes, and this plane was following his wife around, and Charlie Kirk would have noticed this plane when he came into Utah airport. It's a small airport. Charlie Kirk and her husband are really into planes, right? Which is, kind of weird, but anyways. And she says this about his memory.
He really liked planes and knowing everything about them. And more crucially, I want you guys to understand this, Charlie had a photographic memory. He did. Donor names, emails, numbers. Charlie Kirk was a walking Excel sheet. You'd walk into a room, he'd say, that's so-and-so, 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 so-and-so. He works for so-and-so, she works for so-and-so. They gave this much last year. That is why he was able to turn Turning Point USA into a successful machine, because of his memory. It was unbelievable.
Okay, so saying he had a photographic memory, some people have total recall. They remember everything that's ever happened. And they're miserable, right? Like, it's not a good thing. Now, all of us, she has a good memory. Anybody who does this, Tucker Carlson's got a good memory. Alex Jones has a good memory. They all have good memories because it's important to have, I have a good memory. Because, you'll see people be able to pull up information that most people would have forgot about. And when you do this for a living, you focus more intently on things, and then you remember them better. But, I have these memories that I pull up all the time, and they're important, things that have been maybe, been given like, I don't know how a reminder of, like they've been given special place in my, memory storage system. And they end up paying dividends years later when I'm making these videos, right? And I could just listen in my classes when I was a kid, and I could get A's on my tests without studying, without, unless there was information that wasn't presented in class. But I have a, high recall. I had a good retention level for my reading and things like this, even with dyslexia. But, having a photographic memory is not a great thing because, forgetting is kind of a blessing. And one of the great things about the Sajmark system is that because of the cleaning of the samskaras, you still have the memories, but the emotional charge is no longer there. Especially, mostly for bad things. Where if you had a trauma and you have a memory of that trauma, that you get re-traumatized, right? You re-experience the feelings you had when you went through something, especially something abusive. But in the Sizemore system, you can have that memory, and then the trauma, the emotional reaction gets cleaned away in the cleaning process, right? Which is a true blessing. But what she's talking about here is his memory about donors, right? Like, it just comes back to, she said, he looked at success as being financial success. And, everything was about donors, right? That he would remember all these donations and this thing. So she's using that as an example to say he would have remembered the plane. But she's characterizing the guy as being all about the money, which he was, right? He's all about the Benjamins. Not Benjamin Netanyahu, or not that other guy, Ben, whatever his name, what's his, Shapiro? I don't know. But, he's about the money for the Benjamins, the $100 bills, or the $1 million bills of $100 million bills he's getting from Israel. And that's what was his driving force. And so, let's see if she says anything else about that.
Believable. That's all going to be relevant now, okay?
Okay, so she said that, and then later on she's going to say this. So she goes on to say this. It takes a little while for the point to be made here that I'm looking for, but
that day. And it must have been so new that it was over by the next event after Charlie died, because he wasn't there again. So he just out of the blue was at this event, and then he wasn't, and he secured the SD cards.
Okay, she's talking about the SD guy said that he usually wouldn't be at an event this small. The guy that grabbed the cards and did he did the video. Remember that guy who did the video, his personal reaction to Charlie Kirk being shot? And he told her that it was something new they were doing, but they haven't done it since. So they did it once, which is, lying, right?
Okay. It was something that I noticed that the rest of the world would not have taken as a concrete fact. It is also how I felt, and I'm sharing this with you now for a reason, when I learned that Charlie flew into Salt Lake City that morning. Because why didn't he fly into the much closer Provo airport? Now, ostensibly, the answer is because he had an interview with a person that nobody really knows. He's a managing director of a restaurant fund. Andrew K. Smith, out of nowhere, does this restaurantology interview with Charlie. And so Charlie flew into Salt Lake to make this interview happen. That, to me, felt like an oddity, okay? Because in a typical scenario, Charlie is not going to be incentivized to go out of his way, because he would only do it, actually, if there was a big donor on the hook, and maybe that.
So this is important, right? Charlie Shekels, he ain't going out of his way unless you have shekels to give him, right?
Big donor on the hook, and maybe that's what he was told. This guy's going to give a ton of money to Turning Point USA, or B, because it was a major political person. Otherwise, for the sake of a podcast, people travel to Charlie, okay? If you want to get Charlie, you're going to travel to Charlie to make that happen. He's not going to go out of his way.
Unless you are a big donor. So she's, trying to make a different point here. Well, I don't give a shit about that point. About how, that's weird, and, she did that, and the plane, and this, that, and the Saudi plane, it's really, an Israeli plane. I mean, this whole thing. She's defining him as his person. When she talked about his memory, she talked about him counting his shekels. Right? Like, he had a great memory for his shekels, even though he needed an audit at the end of his life, or before he was killed, because he realized his shekels were disappearing. And that other guy covers that to whatever extent. Stuff with Erika. And then she says, if Charlie was going to go out of his way, it's only if you're a big donor. How much of this was about him getting donation money? Like, he just existed for that. It's more about an organization that's going to get money than anything else, right? Because the grassroots nature of this organization and the enthusiasm from young people could have been pulled off without a lot of money, right? So he didn't need hundreds of millions of dollars to run this thing. And they had enough merch and these things, but, he wanted to be bigger and he wanted to be more financially successful. And that's who he was as a person. That's what he cared about. And he's willing to sell out the Palestinian children in the country of Palestine on the behest of an evil country that's, that's usurping American interests. I mean, it's a traitorous act. It's a Judas act. And sell out his religion, sell out his Republican Party, sell out his audience, sell out these young people, sell out America, all so he can get shekels, right? So that's who he was. Like, there's no, whatever else he was as a person. Seems like he had a fake marriage that, whatever, he might have been gay or whatever. Who knows what his thing was. It doesn't seem like he had a real wife. He doesn't, none of this stuff. So the only thing that seems real is the shekels, right? Because he himself was, he knew that Israel sucked, and he didn't start talking about it until his viewers started to leave him and his organization was in peril. This is where he was caught between wanting to take shekels and keeping his audience and being called out as a fraud. And so, and who knows why that's happening with her. And because Tucker Carlson is an obvious shill piece of shit. And so is Megyn Kelly. And so they turned on Israel. Why? Why did they turn on Israel? Like they carry the water for Trump. They won't call out Trump. They won't call out any of this other bullshit. They won't even call out Turning Point. They won't call out TPUS gay. They won't certainly call out Erika Kirk or J.D. Vance. They won't talk about the Republican failure and the epic Republican failure. I mean, there's one specific thing, which is the most powerful lobbying group, and that's the one that nobody was allowed to talk about. And then all of a sudden they're going after that one thing, right? And Candace Owens as well. Hers is a little bit more broad. She has a larger net, which is good, but not those guys, right? And so, it seems the whole thing is just like a big fucking hoax. I mean, that's always a possibility. And, it's going nowhere. Let me show you this one last thing to show you. So, like I said, you lose me when you start bringing up Egyptian planes, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense. For any of these things to work, the less people that are involved, the less people who know, and the more simple it is, the better, right? Because, you have lots more loose ends, and you don't need a big, extensive crew of assassins or whatever. You don't need to fly people in from Egypt to be a part of the assassination, like that are really Israelis posing, whatever it is, right? Trump's meeting with Saudi Arabia today, and he's trying to get them to normalize relations with Israel. Like what Trump does, like he's on behalf of Israel, right? But like this whole thing, to have these planes there, it's getting away from the big fish in this, the big star of the show, which is Erika, even though she's hinting at stuff here, and the rest of it. Like, it's just, when you get into these details, I mean, there's so much information that you guys who are just coming into the truth community, who came into the truth community after like 2008 or 10 or whatever, all the 9/11 videos, every possible angle being covered, all the information that was out there in the truth community, it was extensive, it was comprehensive, and it was undeniable, even though there's a lot of disinformation as well. But that all got erased. YouTube changed their policies. Those videos, I mean, they're all gone. I had videos that I kind of remade. They're on my backup channel. But, one of the things that they talked about was thermite. In the beginning, I believed thermite just like everyone else. And then I realized that they didn't use thermite in buildings that covered the steel girders in concrete, which was happening at the World Trade Center. To take a building down with thermite, which they never do, because they have to blow out. They also have just concrete. Thermite only works on cutting steel. It doesn't work on cutting concrete, like concrete pillars. And so what they would have needed is a lot of different charges, or, which I believe the real answer is, a mini nuke that would vaporize the bottom half of the building, right? So like it's, they had a controlled demolition problem, because even Building 7 was like almost twice as big as the tallest building they've ever taken down by controlled demolition. All these big buildings they're building, they have no way to take them down without massive environmental hazard, which create toxicity in the city for freaking ever, right? But in terms of that, there's all this comprehensive knowledge, and it still didn't do a dent. It didn't change anything, right? And so when you start analyzing everything, well, let's listen to this here.
Doing that. Then, of course, that made me only look further into the Egyptian planes, and I discovered that the planes had been tracking Charlie. We showed you guys this, right? We created this document, and we organized it SUBND being the blue plane, and then tail number SUBTT being the yellow plane. That seems to have struck even more fear into the nest of mockingbirds.
Yellow plane and blue planes and these things, right? So many planes. You got a plane, red fish, blue fish, one fish, two fish, like whatever. Like it's just, where are we going here? You gotta reel this fucking thing in, Candace, right?
In fact, they sent Mother Mockingbird out, Ben Shapiro, to make the exact same wild allegation out of thin air that I said something specifically about Erika when I had not. Again, I'll ask the question, why Erika? Why didn't Ben on stage say she accused Mikey or Rob McCoy? I've done multiple episodes now on Mikey McCoy, on Rob McCoy, speaking about Andrew Colvett.
Well, the reason they would say that, I mean, at least on the surface, is she's the grieving widow. Because, it's offensive for you to say anything about poor grieving professional widow Erika Kirk, right?
Alex Clark, why did they keep going back to Erika? What is it about these Egyptian planes that were making them spiral? Now, I'm going to let you guys know right now that it is difficult to investigate a matter, especially when it involves a person that you know, because there are...
Okay, so she has some woman, some housewife that figured out that planes were actually tracking Erika. And then the blue fish, she gets to the yellow and the blue plane, but it's just... like at what point do you reel this thing in? Because, you can call it right now. You can say what it is. No one's going to jail. I mean, Turning Point is DPUSK. They have no views. I'm getting more views than they are. Like a lot of my videos get more views than their regular videos. And they have a staff of 500 people. Like they're fucked. Like they need to get hundreds of thousands of views per video and all the rest of it. And they're not, they have no stars over there. I mean, they got Erika that shows up and cries and does her bullshit, which people mock. But other than that, she's very unlikable. She's in Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris level of unlikability. Being a former beauty queen, which is always a big strike for like other women and just for men in general, but they don't know it. And it's the way that she presents herself. She's not likable when she's not grieving, but she's a lot more likable then. She's probably 300% more unlikable when she's grieving. And that's her new role. She's going to be the grieving widow because she doesn't really have anything worth saying. Like people, she isn't the person that people want to listen to. She's the person was married to Charlie Kirk, right? And so like people aren't like, hey, what is Erika Kirk saying? Like she hasn't had this huge fans and huge following. She had some Instagram shit and some other things, but it was more about being his wife, not standing on her own. And then running this fucking shitty company that's can't go much further. They're going to have to like reinvent themselves unless they're getting so much shekels for, who knows what's happening with that. But in terms of the money they're getting. But either way, you guys get it. Like the whole thing is, if you're not going to talk about Charlie Kirk as he is, or as he was, it's being a piece of shit. And if you do that, then who cares about this stuff, right? Red planes and yellow planes and all the rest of it. None of it really matters because you're never going to get confirmation of this. It's never going to be any federal investigation. It's just like with the Epstein files. There will be no resolution to this thing. And so, other than playing some role for the deep state that you keep on talking about, it's just about clicks and views and things like that at this point because, other than that, there's nothing really worth value. This is, there's nothing that's going to come of this. Okay, so this whole video is going to go in a journey series. I was going to do the beginning part of the video, then I forgot to just... and I'm like, well, I just might as well put the whole thing in there because it speaks to this. And I got a couple of good spiritual comments, things that I want to address here. Let's get rid of that thing. Okay, so the thing with Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, I had that up and it came up when I pulled up this. Well, whatever, I don't want to explain this. It doesn't really matter. This person writes, how does that liar stay alive? Kaboom, Bibi's incrimination denial of Charlie Kirk's demise is history repeating itself. So this must be an older video. And this person writes, how does that liar stay alive? I'm a Jewish American and I am so against the genocide Netanyahu is pushing with Gaza and partnering with Witkoff, Kosher and Trump in the demolition Gaza to build Trump resort. We are fucking paying for this shit. I love your swearing. It cracks me up. Thank you for making me laugh. You know, and I was say to that, you know, the person saying that they're a Jewish American, you know, I had one of my best friends from my second college at he listens to some of these videos occasionally. Like he's the only person that contacts me from my second life, right? So I had a first life where I went from, I mean, you could call, you know, your time as a toddler a life, right? But your time as a baby and a toddler, because you don't even remember anything about that. Like that's gone, like a past life that's gone. I think somebody here recommended a video from Master Chargy, the third master of the Sizemore system. And he was saying, I'm not sure where I heard this, but he was saying the reasons that we don't remember our past lives. So imagine if you had 50 lives and you were married to different people in all of those lives. Like some of those lives you were a man, some of those lives you were a woman, and you married these various people. And you saw those people now in a different form, but the same soul. And you could fully remember your marriage to them and your love for them. And how hard that would be, right? Like how hard that would be if you saw these people that were your kids in past lives. And let's say you were a parent and you lost your kid when they were like 10 years old and you wept and you never got over that, right? And then you see that kid in a future life. There was this girl that was an Abhyasi from Austria. And when my family and I were in India, she just became friends with the family. She was like 25. And she was just this great person, like really effervescent. You know, her mom had died when she was young, so she had started to practice early on. Like Chargy gave her an exemption. She started when she was, 15 or 16. But she was just one of these people that everybody liked, and she bonded with my whole family. She was like almost like an older daughter to the kids, to my kids. Like she was like a daughter. And I talked to her about Sepulcher because she lived in Austria, and some other things, and truther stuff. And she was one of the first people. There was a bunch of young people there because my kids weren't into the truther stuff. Like they didn't, listen to me. But there were a bunch of young people that were starting to, a few of them were, India is a place where they're not really into being truthers, and there's not really a truth movement. But there are some people there, and she was one of them. She was probably the biggest one, where it was just, she really was interested in all these things I had to talk about. And one of the reasons was to go to India to see if there was, any use for this knowledge that I had accumulated with our family going through homeschooling and homesteading and this whole thing that we had done. And there really wasn't, because Kamesh Patel was was such a douche and such a dumbass. And he, was so mainstream, and he's just turned out to be a total piece of shit. And so there's no future in it. And then, of course, my YouTube channel took off right at that time. So this is like right before the YouTube channel took off. And she was one of the first people there. I was like, oh, this is really valuable. Like there's an audience for this, right? And all the stuff that you guys hear me talk about here. And she ended up leaving, and I got really sad, like just, in a way that was inexplicable. And I thought that perhaps in a past life she had been my daughter or somebody, and she had died, and like I was experiencing, because that happens. You'll meet people from foreign countries at ashrams. We used to. Now, of course, no one, we don't, the thing's dead with Kamesh Patel and Heartfulness. But you go to these gatherings and you meet people, and for 2 weeks you go through something really intense. There was a girl, she was from Russia. She was about my age. And my first trip to India, we traveled together. And it was like we went through a really bad marriage in like 2 weeks, like some past life bad marriage. It was just awful. Like there was just conflict between us. It was just a weird thing, right? But you'll find people that you just have immediate rapport with, and you'll never see them again. It's like they just happen to be in India when you're there, or they're traveling with Chargy, and you spend some time with them, and then they're like gone. Or there are people that I would see in America once a year, and now I haven't seen these people in years, and you get really close because, there's a real intimacy in the levels of spiritual, like, connection to God that you experience. Your heart's like very awake and alive, and so you're just more loving and all these things, and you just, you connect with these people, and some of them you've had some sort of past life connection, right? And so it's a weird thing, and I'm not sure what I even started talking about this for. Oh, what I was saying is, like, you have a life when you're a toddler, and you don't remember that life. Like, you were a little kid. You learned, it's where you grow more than any other time in your life. All the major milestones that you're going to need, you're going to learn to, you feed yourself, to sit up, to crawl, to walk, to run, to jump, right? To play, to talk, to listen, to understand language. And then, use a potty. I mean, all these things that you do, feed yourself and put on your own clothes and all these things at your formative years. And then you turn 7 years old and your brain wipes out most of those memories, and they're gone like forever. And like that part of your life is, that's like a past life. And then you have a life until you turn into like a preteen, teenager. And then there's a life as a teenager and a young adult. And then, all these things. And, my second attempt at college, there was this life, and I, I lived with my brother for a bit and his family, and then I had my own apartment. And me and this Jewish guy started a basketball team together. And, he's a little bit of a truther. His son is becoming a truther. He sent me an essay his son had written. And he listens to these videos from time to time, and he calls me. I mean, once in a while we talk and, whatever. It's been a while. But he was Jewish, but I don't think he ever went to temple. When I knew him, I was Catholic, and I wasn't going to church, right? And so people say, well, this is what I am because I grew up with it. But are you that? Like, this thing with Abiyasis, when Sajmar were called Abiyasis, aspirants, and a lot of people, I wouldn't recall them Abiyasis. They never read the books, and they were doing other things they weren't supposed to do. They were mixing and matching things. They were doing rituals. They were still doing their religion. They were still doing things that they really weren't supposed to be doing with the system. They really didn't know how the system worked. And they maybe weren't even that sensitive to the transmission and cleaning. And so, they were like Abiyasis in name only, like rhinos, right? And so, people say they're part of a religion or part of a culture. I mean, I don't talk about being Italian or being Irish, German, and Albanian because I'm really not. Like, I have very little. I mean, there's genetics. Yeah, sure, there's those genetics. But those genetics aren't the same with each person from that country. So, there's some tendencies that you have culturally and, whatever it is. But, I'm an American, and even then, I'm not really the typical American, right? So it's like, people identify with stuff. I'm not a Catholic, but I went to Catholic church, and I didn't leave the Catholic religion because I had a bad time. I just found something better, right? Like, I didn't have a bad breakup with Catholicism. It's just I found something better, right? And I have a stronger relationship with Jesus. I had a dream with Jesus in it, which I've talked about quite a bit. And I'm not going to talk about it here because, whatever. But I've, it's been in so many videos. It had to do with Christians coming here to this channel. And so, I never had a dream with Jesus when I was a Catholic, right? But anyways, so there's that. People say things about what they are as people, but, are you, people don't think about, like, am I really that anymore, right? Like, how many of us are really even Americans anymore based on what we know? It's like you graduate to a different, when you become a spiritual person, you're not any of those things. You're just a soul. Like, you're not white, you're not black, you're not, Jewish, you're not Catholic, you're not, Muslim, you're not any. When you become a spiritual person, you're just, you're looking to be just your soul, right? The true reflection of your soul. Sometimes I just have some, thoughts about things that aren't really specific to the comment, right? And so this person said, how is the Planet Oversight Committee that Babaji This person spelled Babaji right. It's Babujy. There are Babaji, Babayjji. But anyways, how is the Planetary Oversight Committee that told Babaji to start World War II different than the whimsical, immature, biblical God? My question is genuine, and I assert that each one of us must take full responsibility for the use of our psychic gifts and not ask to get permission from some external authority figure, even a spiritual handler as described. Well, I was talking about memory before, and I meant to include this. I'm glad that this person wrote this comment. And so Babaji had a different kind of consciousness. And again, you can believe this or not. Like, I'd never met him, but I fully 100% trust Chargy, the second master of the system. He was just a great person. But, aside from that, I mean, this is the story. Like, this is the story. You have to assess whether you believe it or not, right? And so Babaji had an operation when he was younger, like in his 20s. Well, first of all, his dad was like a lawyer, and they were kind of rich, and they had a house, in a poor town in Shah Jahanpur. And Babaji was the eldest son. And he was being, well educated there, based in having come from wealth. And at some point he just said, I don't want to learn what other people are saying about the world. I want to have direct knowledge. Like, he didn't want to read books. He wanted to, just have some direct experience through divinity. And so eventually he pursued spirituality. And, he was just like the best at that. He had been Patanjali in a past life, which, again, you're either going to believe that or you're not. Patanjali was the father of Ashtanga Yoga, the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga. And he had been, a spiritual person in past life, and he had, a lot of spiritual talent. And he had this operation, and it wiped out his memory. And he never really had his memory like most people have it. So if you asked him a question, he would go and intercommune with his spiritual master and, basically God, but usually some of these higher developed souls that oversee the guiding of the planet. There's disembodied souls that people refer to as angels that sometimes incarnate and are human beings, and sometimes they're, monitoring and guiding people through whatever processes there are, right? And so people would come and ask questions, and like some Christians came and they asked about Jesus, and Babaji went and intercommuned with Jesus and told about Jesus. Like, he went directly to the source, and Jesus answered their questions directly. And Babaji was like the ultimate conduit, and he would just obey these divine beings. And so, you either believe that or not. Like, he either had the ability to do that. And for you guys, you have nothing but me talking about it. And you can read the Whispers of the Brighter World messages, which are French women who channel various people, including mostly Babaji. Probably 98% of the messages are for Babaji. But then there's other divine beings that she channels, and you can believe they're accurate or not, right? It's just, it's something where these messages are given to everybody, and she was the one who took them down. Like, she had specific abilities as a medium. But in terms of any of these things, it's whether it's true or not, right? I mean, if it's not true, then it's not good at all. Like, if it's not true, if it's some bullshit thing, it's very detrimental because it takes people's faith away. So really, it's how well you can evaluate people's ability or other people, whether they're being sincere or not. And not just sincere, because sometimes people believe their own lies. But, did Babaji actually have these abilities? And did he receive orders from above? And again, like, he didn't do things on his own. He was basically guided through these beings, especially his spiritual master. And he surrendered to them and would just go along with everything that they said. And, if he was crazy and those were just voices he was hearing, he was schizophrenic, then that would be kind of detrimental. And then everyone would be following the crazy person, in terms of these things. But the transmission, the cleaning that's available in the system, you can experience these things for yourself. And like, one of the things I experienced was when I started doing the meditation, I had these incredible experiences, my first 3 individual sittings. Like, I experienced a deep level, like I felt like I was, I experienced what it was like to be in what's called the central region, where you merge with God. Like, I had a brief experience with that. And it changed my whole perspective and my whole path of my existence because of that. And then I started to read these books, and it was like the information was already inside me, and the transmission had pulled it out. And so I was reading the books, it's like I already knew the books. Like I already, like it was like the books were inside of me, like the teachings, like I already had it there. Like it was given to me through these first sittings and through the meditation. And so that was, that was a confirmation for me because of the experience, right? And so there's been so many other things like that I can't really get into. It's just this video is already long, but I discuss these things from time to time. I mean, I've already talked about some of the things that I would say here. And so, but it really comes down to whether he's telling the truth or not, and then how do you figure that out for yourself? Like, how do you know it to be true? Like, that's the real problem. How can you mold yourself to where you can see the truth and see the people who are sincere and the people who are actually connected to God, to the people that are pretenders, right? And that's, the Sajmark system, you have experiences, and the experiences are there to help validate the whole rest of the thing. So that is for people to, each person has to find that out for themselves. Okay, I haven't read through all the questions, but I have one more here, and I'll see if there's any more. And so this person says, although I've heard your stories from time to time about treatment centers before, they have the same negative impact on me each time. Some things can't be unheard. It reinforces your message that the system is fucked and not worth saving. Monsters are real brothers and sisters. Yeah, the thing about it is, like, I'm glad I did that work. There was a couple experiences. I dated this girl who was a nurse. We were engaged for a period of time. And when I was waiting tables and she went back to work, she wanted to be a bartender. She had dated one of my ex-roommates, and I was looking to get out of Connecticut because I just really don't like it there. And I was thinking about moving to Hawaii. And my car broke down, and, it was in front of this place called Harbor Park. It's halfway to the ocean. It's on the Connecticut River, and it's kind of like a seafood place, because it's it's on the waterfront. And I ended up working there. I was working there, and my car broke down like a mile before I was, where I was going to work, right? And it was a road. It was like 84 West, like this big highway, a 4-lane highway in Connecticut. Like 3 or 4 lanes on each side. And I don't know a lot of people that drive that road regularly. And I have these friends that were builders, like from college. They had their dad built houses, and they drive. And my friend's brother's driving a truck, and he sees me, but they're in the far left lane, and they're going to stop and help me, and they're on their way to work. And then I see my friend, and they're both going pretty fast, and then they start putting on my brakes, and then my ex-roommate's girlfriend, who I was friends with, we were friendly, she pulls over, and she sees me, and she's in the right lane. She pulls over. My other friends see that, I'm being taken care of. So it's a weird thing. And, kind of dangerous, too, because there's a lot of cars going by. And she picks me up, and we have a talk. I say, I'm working here. And she goes, well, I'm living across the street, right? And so she says, well, her and her friends are going to the Virgin Islands. One of her friends used to bartend there. And so I end up going, and we end up, like, hooking up, and we date for a while. And we come back, and she wanted to get out of nursing, but and we come back to America. She's like, we had a horrible time in Virgin Islands. It was right after the hurricane, and those places are not places to go live. Those islands, they're fucked, and they're not good. They're corrupt and bad, So we come back, and she gets a job, sort of back where that she was working, maybe at the same place, and across from that Harbor Park where the Connecticut River is. But we're a ways away from that, and she's there, and there's a guy some crazy guy, and he's gonna beat the shit out of her. So he gets mad at her, and she threatens that she's gonna kill him. And I'm like, you gotta quit. I'm like, you can't do that. And she said, she ended up quitting, I think, because I basically was just, you can't do that. But she had said, her friend said, you just can't tell your significant others. Then this guy had punched a doctor, which is you can't do that. You do that, and you're it's not, they'll come down on you, the whole place. Like they have ways of getting back at you, right? I mean, it's just, this guy was crazy. And, she, her friend said, just can't tell people about it because they don't understand, right? Because I hadn't worked in treatment centers yet. I was waiting tables. And years later, we broke up and, I started working in this field. I started working at my first treatment center. And I was pretty enthusiastic about it, and I was glad to be finally, on some sort of a career path that would lead to me getting my master's in counseling. And, I'm pretty much, I'm talking to her about, like, I think I'm making a difference with these kids, like, a bunch of shit like that. And there's a pause. We saw each other, we met each other for something, where, we'd been broken up for about like 6 months, and she goes, I think maybe we're talking on the phone. Or we're talking on the phone. There's a long pause. And she says, the best thing you could do for these kids is to take them out back and machine gun all of them. Right? Because she had been working in the field for years, and I was like, well, that's pretty harsh, but I mean, not that she meant that she wasn't serious about that, but what she meant is they had no future and they're just going to do damage everywhere. And, other than maybe a random person, like once in a while, one of these people, I mean, they don't have when you're not loved at the beginning of your life and you don't have a stable house, a stable family, you don't have parents who love you. I mean, it fucks you up. Like, think about how fucked up you are, and you maybe have, reasonable parents that didn't abuse you. And so, these kids that grow up in this hellish environment, of course, I experienced this with my ex, who was sexually abused by her dad and physically, emotionally abused by her mom. And her dad was like a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. They were successful. But, it just fucks you up. Like, you can't, I mean, even people don't live in a necessarily loving family home. You think about all the ways you're fucked up. Even people live in a good house, a good family, get fucked up, right? And so, it's hard to really understand, like, what kind of hellish environment people live in. War-torn countries and, I mean, human trafficked and just the way people have been abused. And it twists those people, and then they pass it on to their kids, and, it's a never-ending cycle. And, having experienced that, I mean, I'm not psyched about it. I don't like to think about it. And it's just, but I see it every day now in the job I do here, how fucked up people are and how, warped their sensibilities are and how disconnected they are from divinity and all of it, right? And, I'm glad I experienced it because at least I know. Like, I know the worst and the best. I met the highest developed person spiritually, and I met the lowest of the low. And, I have a full range of what human beings are capable of, and it's a good thing. I guess it's a good thing, because it's a great thing in lots of ways. But, it's burdensome, right? Okay, so one more comment here. Someone wrote, nuclear weapons don't exist, and that's it. That's their whole comment. And I think more than anything else in the truth community, that's the kind of shit that's just a bummer. Like, you don't know, and it doesn't really matter. I must have said something about nuclear weapons. I mean, technically, I don't know if they're real or not. I mean, it's certainly talked about in, like I said, the Mahabharata. It's talked about in the Sajmark system, as well as confirmation of these things, and that these nuclear weapons are going to ruin the world. So, I mean, for me, that's a legitimate source of information. And then there's lots of evidence supporting it, right? But, a lot of the things in the official story are bullshit. So that's true. So there's always some doubt with everything. There should be some doubt as a truther, unfortunately, because we can't trust everything the government says. But certainly it's not a slam dunk that there's no nuclear weapons. Especially since the only thing that really is making you say that is that you're I should use the book my choice for this thumbnail here. The only thing that's making you say that is that you watch some videos, you've heard somebody's theory on this, and you're totally convinced, and you're going to announce reality, and that's just it's depressing how much of that exists in the truth community, where people announce reality, and they, like it's a deal breaker for them, in terms of your video. Oh, you believe in nuclear weapons, so you must be full of shit. And it's just, I better tell this guy. I'm like, no, like just you don't. You could say, I don't think they're nuclear weapons. And I'd be like, still, why the fuck are you telling me that? Okay, that's great. Thanks, random fuck, right? Like, I mean, you're just leaving a comment that's, well, how does that add to the video, right? Like, it's not about you and what you believe, right? You could go make a video about why you don't believe in nuclear weapons. Like, you could go and do your own thing on your platform, but, it just has nothing to do really with the video. I was talking about the Ma Barata, I believe, and all those things. Anyways, let me wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's paramount, definitely important to the apocalypse. And the ascension, everyone have a blessed day, and be grateful.